It is 9:30.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Western Municipal Water District's Board of Directors meeting for December the 7th. Just a couple of housekeeping items this morning, please. If you are a member of our audience today and you have a cell phone, if you would please silence that for us this morning so you're not that person in the audience. And as a reminder to my colleagues, the memo that was placed up on the dais in accordance with our new adopted district policy, board members are no longer to have electronic and communication devices at the dais. I would ask that you remove and silence those devices, silence any electric communication devices that you have, and remove any ear pods that you may have in at the dais. Thank you. In compliance with that policy. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order this morning. I would like to take an opportunity for the December 7th recognition. It is Pearl Harbor Day. It is a significant piece of our history for the United States. And if we could take just a moment of silence, please, to remember the folks who lost their lives in that event. Thank you very much. I certainly appreciate that. And my family was directly impacted as I had military personnel assigned at Pearl Harbor the day it was bombed. And I have Pearl Harbor survivors in my family. Thank you very much. Appreciate your attendance here today. We'll go ahead and call the roll and read in our COVID protocols this morning.
Thank you. Good morning. Pursuant to Western Municipal Water District Resolution 3262, in an effort to protect the public health, prevent the spread of COVID-19, and because state and local officials are recommending measures to promote social distancing, the public may view this board meeting virtually, via Zoom, and in person. This meeting is being live streamed at WMWD.com and will be video recorded for on-demand viewing and broadcasting purposes. As stated on the agenda, members of the public who wish to comment on any item on the agenda may make comments in person, virtually via Zoom, or by submitting comments on the district's website. Comments received on the district's website before 4:30 p.m. December 6, 2022 will be made part of the board meeting record. For those participating in the Zoom meeting who wish to provide public comments, please indicate such by using the raise hand feature, and we will call on you individually. For those participating by telephone who wish to provide public comment, you may do so by pressing *6 to unmute yourself and *9 to activate the raise hand feature. If there is more than one caller, you will be identified and called on one at a time. Any public comment will be limited to 3 minutes in duration. However, the presiding officer reserves the right to reduce the amount of time you will be allowed to speak to ensure that all members of the public have an opportunity to provide their comment. I will now take roll call for the meeting. Due to the complexity of conducting this meeting by Zoom and telephonically, I will not be taking roll call for staff members or the public at this time. Director Roten.
I am here. Good morning.
Good morning. Director Rizvi.
Good morning, I'm here.
Thank you. Good morning. Director Gardner.
Good morning, I am present.
Good morning. Director Torres.
Good morning.
Good morning. President Denstedt.
Good morning. I'm present.
Thank you. Good morning. President Denstedt, you do have a quorum today.
Thank you very much. At this time, we'll go ahead and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. We do have Chris here this morning to lead us in the pledge. Chris, if you could give us your title, what department you work for, and how long you've been a Western employee, and then lead us in the pledge, please.
I'm Chris Sutchin. I am a coordinator for the Enterprise Asset Management team, and I've been with the district for 10 years now.
Great. Thank you.
Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. It's always nice to have our employees come in and lead us in the pledge. We appreciate you being here today. At this time, we'll go ahead and move into public comments. This is the portion of the meeting in which you may make comments on any item that is not currently posted on our agenda. If you're here to make comments on an agenda item that is posted today, we will call upon you at that time to speak on that item and make your comments. So this is for items that are not currently posted on our agenda for today. Madam Secretary, do we have anyone who wishes to comment under general public comments?
President Dinstead, yes, I do have several comments under the general comment section.
Okay. For those members on Zoom, if you could please identify yourself by raising your hand that you wish to comment under public comment for items not currently posted on our agenda so we can get a count of how many individuals wish to speak this morning.
President Dinstead, on Zoom, I have no requests during general comment. I do have three members of the public in the audience.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll go ahead and leave the comment portion to 3 minutes, and this is for general comment for any item that is not currently posted on our agenda this morning. Madam Secretary, if you could call the first person, please.
Thank you. Paul Rodriguez.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Paul Rodriguez. I'm a Western customer and have been a public servant for almost 30 years. In that time, I've worked with hundreds of elected officials and actively engaged with nearly 50 public agencies annually in my professional and volunteer roles. Recently, I was asked to take a close look at Western's board and consider running for Division 2. As someone who has long held the district in high regard, I was shocked and disappointed to confirm the tension and dysfunction that arises when a single individual follows an agenda that is counter to public interest. I'll speak to that item on 8C, but want to talk now about the election, my observations about Western, and provide some suggestions for strengthening customer and regional advocacy. First, I believe in the election process and support the final certification. During my grassroots campaign, I visited thousands of homes, walked hundreds of miles, and spoke to many individuals and stakeholders that made an impression. Felix and Tom in Orange Terrace have made significant efforts in water conservation while maintaining attractive and beneficial landscaping. Pete in Orange Crest made a valid point about fines. They should be applied as a disincentive, not as a revenue source for circumstances beyond customers' control. Tracy in Riverside had great questions about stormwater capture. And several Temescal Valley residents were curious about desalination options and Colorado River's water supply. I saw something, said something, and did something. Secondly, after attending more than a dozen meetings, it is clear to me that Western staff and leadership is top-notch. They are charged with a complex system and a diverse range of responsibilities. As with any public agency, staff operates in a challenging environment where public direction is guided by elected officials that are either engaged or distracted, and a customer base whose needs and interests are often in conflict. Finally, the board's committee structure provides an opportunity for input and shaping of strategies and policies necessary for reliable service, sustainable resources, and public engagement. These meetings are vital to consensus building and exploration of alternatives, and yet participation by board members is not uniform. Looking to the future, I suggest the following for improved participation and leadership engagement. Ensure that each attending board member weighs in on every item. Right now, committee members simply ask for questions and comments. Lastly, ask committee chairs to include a summary at the end of each board meeting under committee reports. Thank you for the opportunity to address you and share my thoughts.
Thank you. Frank Montez.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I will reserve my time to speak on item 8C. 8C. But I did want to say good morning. Good morning, Mr. Gardner. Looking forward to that item. Quite a bit of excitement here today. I just want to say that it was very cold outside, but it's okay. We're used to working in the cold and in 120, 30-degree heat. And I will see you guys shortly on item 8C.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kareem Gongor, Gongor?
Thank you. Yes, Kareem Gongora. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to make public comment. I do want to congratulate directors that have been reelected. I do want to highlight Director Gracie Torres and your election and the work that you did to get reelected with nearly 60% of the vote. So I definitely want to send you a kudos for listening and being engaged in your community. That speaks measures about the type of leadership that you bring to this community in this area. And I just want to wish everyone a good meeting. Hopefully it goes well. I know there's some contentious topics on the agenda, and I hope you just do this amicably and in a way that is dignified of the type of institution this place is. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay. At this time, we'll go ahead and move into the presentation portion of our agenda this morning.
Okay, what we have, ready? We have two presentations today. Thank you very much, President Denstead. The first one is an award that we're very proud of, and our team is here today to share that with the board. And I'm going to turn it over to Albert so that he can talk more about the award and his team. So Albert, thank you very much for coming this morning.
Thank you.
We like it. Good morning, Albert.
Good morning. Thank you. Well, good morning. My name is Albert. Good morning, directors and staff, members of the public. My name is Albert Magallon. I'm the water quality manager here at Western Municipal Water District. We're here this morning, as Craig said, to recognize our water quality team for their commitment and excellence. Next slide, please. Western received a couple of awards from SWMOA. What is SWMOA? SWMOA is the Southwest Membrane Operator Association, is an affiliate of the American Membrane Technology Association that is dedicated to the Southwest United States region, including but not limited to Arizona, California, Colorado, Hawaii, Nevada, New Mexico, and Utah. They support the professional development of membrane operators and projects that they oversee. Next slide, please. So as I stated, the Arlington Desalter received Outstanding Large Plant of the Year. Next slide, please. Here are some of the operators of the Arlington Desalter. The water quality team operates the plant in an efficient and precise manner. To operate the Arlington Desalter, you need to be of a caliber that is skilled, proficient, resourceful, and technical. These operators run the plant 24/7, and that couldn't be possible without the support of other teams here at Western, such as the automation, electrical, and mechanical services teams that ensure that the plant's components are operating as they should. There's also the distribution team that ensures that there is room for the water that is delivered when sending into the Mills Gravity Line or the La Sierra Reservoir. As you can see by my examples, it takes multiple departments and staff to make this plant run. Next slide, please. The Desalter was recognized in part for its efficiency and reliability. We constantly met production targets and have an exemplary safety record with 0 permit violations. Next slide, please. The Desalter is a vital piece to Western's infrastructure. The Desalter delivers water to our longtime wholesale customers of the cities of Norco and Corona. With the completion of the Sterling Pump Station and the Santa Ana River crossing, the Desalter is an essential part of Western's wholesale enterprise, giving it the ability to deliver water as far as Jurupa Community Services, Temescal Valley, and Elsinore Municipal Water District, along with our Riverside residential customers. Next slide, please. The other award that was received was the Outstanding Operator of the Year. Next slide. And that award was given to Scott McAnally. Scott McAnally is the longest serving operator here at Western. He's had 18 years of service. Scott holds a treatment 5 and a distribution 5 from the Department of Drinking Water. He is also a AWWA cross-section specialist. Scott has filled in when a neighboring agency needed a certified operator to certify their monthly reports. And Scott has trained all of the operators here at Western. Next slide, please. So there isn't any questions. I'd like to introduce my team. Okay. So first off, we could have Scott McNally come up, please. We have Javier Araguin, Frank Salcedo, Alex Garcia, Brett Ranella, Leo Becerra, Alfredo Mondragon, Ray Vargas, Dean Bradshaw. Okay, that's everybody.
Invite the board to come down and take a photo.
Before we do that, could I say something also about the team? So, besides winning an award, that's great, and Scott is a fantastic operator. He's been around here forever, and as Albert said, he's helped bail other agencies out when they were in a pickle. But it's not just the award. This team decided that we have the skill set and the drive to change the way we do things at Western. And they actually pushed off consultants and contractors that have traditionally done work at Western, and they said, no, we'll learn how to do all this, we'll do it ourselves. It saved us a huge amount of money, saved our customers a huge amount of money. But besides that, you're looking at a whole bunch of really fun personalities, and these guys are actually fun to hang around with besides being really skilled at their job. So congratulations, Albert and the whole team.
And just a couple of words. So you guys do an outstanding job. Recently, we had an opportunity to tour the facility with Chairwoman Gray from Metropolitan, who was incredibly impressed by the operation, the amount of technology that you guys have lifted and made yours, and what you do for efficiency over there, and how much money has been saved to our customers for the operation of that facility. So kudos to you guys. Fantastic job. I really enjoyed going out there and visiting with all of you and seeing your day-to-day operations and being able to have Chairwoman's questions answered so that she can take that to other agencies throughout the region, throughout Southern California, and talk about you guys, that you are the example. You are the bar of excellence that she wants to have everybody else meet. So kudos to you. All right,
Yeah.
pictures?
Madam Chair, before we do, just very quickly, I'd like to highlight for anybody who doesn't know the importance of the Arlington Desalter. It's the primary water source for the city of Norco, and we are now plumbed to where we can provide water not just to Norco, but we can pump it up the hill to our retail customers, we can deliver it to Corona. So this is a true regional resource, and its operation and efficiency is key to getting water to people, not so much our direct customers, but our member agencies' customers. And you guys are really key, and you do a great job. Thank you.
Certainly. Okay.
Can we also have Western staff from the dais take a photo too? I am first.
Have you all shift on this side, if that's all right, please? And if you guys can squeeze together as tight as you can, please, that'd be great. Come on this side of the podium, please. Keep squeezing together. And then I'll go ahead and have 3 board members on one side, 2 board members on the other. That's all right. Go ahead.
Looks like we get this end.
And then you jump in the window. Alex, yeah, no, Dean, switch with Alex. Sorry, Kevin. Squeeze in towards Sarah a little bit.
It's very versatile.
All right, we do have another presentation today.
No, absolutely, and it's always wonderful that we get these types of awards so that, and I'm glad we have a nice full house today because it's really great to share that with the members of the public and that don't know how hard our team works sometimes. You know, we're kind of the unsung heroes. All of our pipelines are underground, so people don't see how much water gets moved around and a lot of the things that happen to make that go. And so kudos. Glad we were able to do this today.
Yeah, it's great, and it's well-deserved by that team. Our next presentation is by Mark Limbaugh, representing the Ferguson Group. Mark is our Washington, D.C. advocate, has been instrumental in landing us a huge amount of grant funding for our projects and steering us through all the trials and tribulations of federal issues. So Mark and his team, Chris Kearney, couldn't be here today. But Mark, happy to have you. And this is just like we had our state annual update. We get monthly updates for the public. We get monthly updates from Mark and his team. But this is the time where we ask him to come in and give us an annual update. So Mark, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. And directors, President Densett, thank you for having me today. And certainly it's always a pleasure to come visit with Western, one of my favorite clients, if not the favorite client. That's what I always tell Craig anyway. But anyway, no, and it's really fun to be here to see the infrastructure that you guys work on to shore up and make sure your water supplies for this community are well taken care of, and to see that honored with some really sharp people that operate that facility. I think that was a highlight for me. So it's good to see that things are working well. Oops, I just goofed it up.
And that the money you get us is put to good use,
Well,
right, Mark?
that goes without saying.
Absolutely.
As always, I have included acronyms. I was asked several years ago to do that, and I think it's a great idea. And certainly, you know, we use a lot of acronyms in DC, and certainly not all of them are well understood. So these are some of them, and I'll leave it to you to decide. There is one new acronym. We had last year we added the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or bill, which is also called the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which is IIJA. So that acronym can go either way. And then the IRA is not the Irish whatever Republican Army. It's Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, and I'll talk a little bit about that. If I can get the arrows correct on this thing. Today, I want to talk a little bit about the 2023 appropriations bills that are before Congress right now, and the importance to Western of those bills. Infrastructure bill implementation, we just talked a little bit about the acronyms there. Water Resource Development Act and Western water legislation, how that's working out in the lame duck Congress. Water Smart grants, PFOS legislation and regulation, which has been an important aspect of our work for Western. And then taking a look into the future, what we're going to be looking at for 2023. So the appropriations bills are not done. Surprise, surprise. Congress is working on those as we speak. Negotiations are continuing on what they call an omnibus bill, which contains 12 appropriations bills. Typically, those are all go through committee or subcommittees, and then the full committee, and are marked up, and then passed by each body, and then conferenced amongst the conferees to come up with a compromise, and then that's passed again by Congress and then sent to the president's desk. Individually, that's probably hasn't happened in a long, long time. So they've come to the conclusion that, you know, we do what they call a CR, a continuing resolution, that basically continues the prior year's appropriation levels until a new bill passes for the next fiscal year. And that's what we're under. We're under a CR right now until December 16th. That 12-bill package is being negotiated. No word yet as to whether they've come to any kind of an agreement. They've don't have too much time to do that. So we think that the December 16th date will be pushed out either right before Christmas or as some of the Republican folks would like to see into the new Congress, where the House will be controlled by the Republicans instead of the Democrats. I'm not sure what that would do, but certainly would make it more interesting. If Congress does say, hey, we can't come to agreement, we're going to just do a full year CR, so it's going to be like FY22 all over again in FY23, then the earmarks that are in the current bill, which includes one of Western's, would go away. Basically, that those, basically the new bill would be earmark free and basically would go through till December 30th, or September 30th. But I don't think that's going to happen. But if it does, that's the consequence of having a full year CR. There has been additional funding provided in both the House and Senate versions of the Energy and Water Appropriations Act bill for the Bureau. So there's additional funding for water conservation and delivery, environmental restoration, fish passage, Wind Act storage and Title 16 funding, and Water Smart. So the appropriators like those programs, and they add money over and above what the President's budget requested has in it. Those funding sources, including the Environmental Protection Agency's state and tribal assistant grants, or STAG grants, are also included in those bills, and one of which is an FY2023 community project funding request for Western, the Western Water Recycling PFOS treatment and prevention, phase 2, for $3.9 million, is in the House version of the Interior and Environment Appropriations Act. And so we're watching that closely. We had bipartisan support for that request. Mr. Issa and Mr. Takano both requested that, and that's why I think we got in, because we did have bipartisan support. It's always nice to have that. Plus, PFOS is a hot button issue in Congress, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a few minutes. The 2024 budget process is ongoing right now. In fact, OMB has locked it down by now. And we'll see the President's request come out in February of next year. The first Monday in February is usually the deadline, although that has been pushed out in the last few years. They haven't met it. Last year it was a little over a month late. But this year I think it'll probably be close to on time. Okay, so our priorities in 2022 included water infrastructure. Obviously, that's very important to Western, and talked a lot about the Delta, community development spending requests. Obviously, just talked about the request, the $3.9 million for phase 2 of the PFOS removal and prevention project. Water Smart grants are important, and we've you have an excellent grant staff. You really do a great job on the grants side of things, and we enjoy working with them and help to make sure that your grant applications are complete and successful. You can't win them all, but you win a lot of them, so it's good to have that. The DCIP, the Defense Communities Infrastructure Pilot Program, you've been successful there with your MARB Water and Sewer Resiliency Project last year, and we'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute. Upper Santa Ana HCP, we watched that pretty closely as well. PFOS I talked about. And then the DC lobbying, you have done outreach every year. In April of 22, you did a round of meetings virtually. And also, Craig, I think you met with Mr. Westerman at Mr. Calvert's request here not too long ago, and he's now going to be the new chairman of the House Natural Resources Committee, which is a big role for him and for Western Water in particular. So thank you for doing that. Man, this arrow thing's got me flummoxed today. Talking a little bit about the infrastructure legislation, the bipartisan infrastructure law, or the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, basically appropriated $1.2 trillion over 5 years for infrastructure. And for water, we've talked a little bit about this before, but the top line numbers for the Bureau was 8.3 billion, sorry. Army Corps got 17 billion, Interior and Fish and Wildlife Service and Forest Service, wildfire rehab, 3.4 billion. USD NRCS got almost $1 billion, et cetera, et cetera. So the important thing for Western is the SRFs, which are typically have been underfunded. Got significant dollars, $17 billion for drinking and $19.9 billion for clean water. And that was distributed to the states, and certainly that's a good source for funding and financing for Western's infrastructure projects. So in implementing the IIJA, that's a lot of funding to go out in 5 years. And typically, you see these kinds of numbers over a much longer time frame. And so the agencies have had to gear up and staff up and put together some very solid timelines in which they're going to do things and get this money out the door. And it doesn't just happen overnight. And Reclamation in particular, who is one of the agencies we work with a lot for the grant side of things, received almost 7 or 8 times the amount they get in 1 year. So, and they have 5 years to do it, to put it out. Plus, they get their $1.5 billion a year on top of that. So it's really put a lot of pressure on their staffing and certainly on their program folks. And so we're working with them quite a bit to ensure that money does get out on the ground and that your projects are considered in that funding. So WaterSmart, received $400 million in total, and in FY 2023, $112.5 million is going to be basically put out there for WaterSmart grants, and that's significant because typically they'll get maybe $20 million a year, and so $112 million in 1 year, that's a pretty big bump. $1 billion for Title 16 was given out by the bipartisan infrastructure law. So in 23, we'll see $150 million for Title 16 grants and then $50 million for the large recycling. The large recycling is a program that's included in the $1 billion that is about $550 million, I think, that was put into that program. And that's for large projects over $500 million that would give 25% grant with no limit. Currently, the Title 16 projects only can get $30 million at a 25% level. So the large recycling projects are going to be critical to the Southwest in many places because of the fact that a new large source of water is needed to deal with the droughts that we've been having both in the Central Valley of California and the State Water Project and then the Colorado River, which is a huge issue right now. Also, a new water storage. A lot of folks say, well, we got plenty of storage, we got empty reservoirs, we got to put water in those. There are places where we do need water storage, and it can help with the system management. So $1.05 billion was given to WIN Act. That was one of the WRDA bills that was passed a few years ago that basically created a water storage cost share program within Reclamation. And $95 million of that is going to those projects in FY 2023. And those projects are already either grandfathered or they've been authorized by Congress. And so we're looking at about $95 million. And as you can see, out of $1 billion, you're only going to spend $100 million. There's more to come on that program in the next several years because they've got 5 years to spend it. $100 million was also given to a new program, a small storage program, which is small storage in that particular bill is defined as between 2 and 30,000 acre feet. So this could be water storage tanks, it could be reservoirs, it could be groundwater storage. And so those that program has just started. They announced The first round was due, I think, the 1st of December. Those small storage projects have to have a feasibility study approved by Reclamation before they can go into the application process. So if Western did have a storage facility or a groundwater storage facility that would meet the requirements, we would want to work with you to get a feasibility study that's not a full federal feasibility study, but they have a guidance out that says exactly what those are, what's entailed in that kind of feasibility study. And that's for a 25% grant up to $30 million. So it mirrors the Title 16 program, only it's for storage, not for recycling or reuse. $20 million was put out in FY22 or FY23, sorry, was the first year. So they've still got a little bit of money in that particular program to go. Aquatic ecosystem restoration protection, that's a new program as well. They got $250 million in the bill for 65% federal grants, and $45 million of that is going to be made available in FY23. That's the first time this program has been put out for a funding opportunity announcement. And that's for, like in-river restoration for aquatic ecosystem in support of a water supply project. So in other words, you're meeting an Endangered Species Act goal or a local fishery type program. That would be something that, you could qualify for. Habitat conservation is one of the things that could look for. Drought contingency in the Colorado River Basin. The bipartisan infrastructure law provided $250 million for lower basin DCP projects, and $25 million of that is allocated to FY 2023. And finally, we talked about the new IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act. There is a large chunk of funding that was put in the Bureau of Reclamation coffers. This is on top of the bipartisan infrastructure law, $8.3 billion, on top of their normal annual appropriation. They also have $4 billion for a drought mitigation in the West. Now, most of that money will probably go to the Colorado Basin because of the severe issues there, but there are other places, the Central Valley of California, Klamath Basin, other places in the West that have experienced long-term significant drought that are really having difficulty meeting the needs and the challenges. And so that funding is there. Reclamation has issued a call for proposals in the lower basin for basically to buy water to put back in Lake Mead. There's 3 tiers of that proposal. The first tier is for a set amount. I think it was between $300 and $400 an acre foot, either for a 1 year or a multiple year, the higher level being for the multiple year, for conservation that would basically back water into Lake Mead from existing water rights and contracts. The second was basically for proposals for whatever price that they want to basically do the same thing over only, have more of a separate type of a category that wasn't structured. It was basically, here, give us all your ideas of what you can do, and we'll put it in the mix and see if it works. So that's the second. And the third tier is for long-term conservation projects, mostly infrastructure related, that would save water for a longer period of time. And those proposals are going to be due early in 2023. So that's the lower basin portion of that. And so, we feel that there's going to be some significant proposals put together. The commissioner has indicated that she wants 2 to 4 million acre feet of reductions. They're not going to come close to that. So it's going to be interesting to see where the other shoe drops on managing the Colorado River. It's a dire situation right now. The IRA also included $500 million to the Bureau of Reclamation for drinking water system improvements, which is something that the Bureau doesn't do, but they can hand out money for that. And it's for disadvantaged communities. So typically, those are small communities, rural areas that are having difficulty with drinking water supplies in a drought. And these are the kinds of things that cause significant issues in those communities, and certainly that's something that is going to be helpful in shoring up those drinking water supplies for those small communities and that are disadvantaged and facing significant challenges. And then there was also $25 million for solar panels over canals. And I think the issue there, I think Mr. Costa was kind of the champion on that one. And basically, where you have canals running throughout California or other places in the West, typically there's the land is controlled by the districts that manage them, and some of those districts are actually public utilities for providing electricity and power. I have several clients that are in that realm, and so they look at buying land for solar, and it's very expensive. But when you already have the land and the canals right there, I mean, it's putting a solar panel over that may make sense because they have miles and miles of these canals. The issues that they're going to run into, and there are several that are piloting this right now, the issue is obviously transmission is one. How do you get the power out of there, and where does it go? How do you store it? And then also, how do you manage the canal with something that's over the top of it? So they have to build it in a way that can allow for the ditches to be cleaned and maintained and managed. Some feel like the shade over the canal can actually help with the water quality in that canal by limiting the aquatic growth that typically will moss up a canal and cause problems with water delivery. So we'll see how that works. It's a cost share. I think it's 50-50, and so we'll see how far that goes in terms of that kind of an idea. So let's talk a little bit about PFOS. Earlier this year, EPA announced it was making $1 billion in grant funding available to address emerging contaminants, including PFOS. And most of that funding was going to disadvantaged communities, which basically populations of less than 10,000 and that have been determined to be disadvantaged under affordability criteria by the state under the State Safe Drinking Water Act. Funds can be used for planning, testing, and remediating emerging contaminants in drinking water and source water. Now, some of your communities could fit that mold, and your grants folks know kind of where those communities are and could possibly be of help in getting another grant under this, but we're still working on that. So the National Defense Authorization Act, which you may have heard in the news, was just released yesterday for this next year of this FY23. That's a must-pass authorizing bill for the Defense Department. For this year to help them meet the needs of the national defense. And in that bill, there's been provisions on PFOS, mainly because of the fact that a lot of the military installations have difficulties with PFOS as a remnant of some of their firefighting foams and that kind of thing. So, and then it gets into pretty much everything, as you're all aware. So the NDAA for fiscal year 22, which is this past year, directed the Defense Department to test for PFOS at 50 priority military sites, but MARB was not one of the priorities. So they are not testing there, at least as far as we know, under this particular authorization. And then to issue a report to Congress on the status of those priority sites in the coming weeks. Actually, it's due by the end of the year. A key concern for Defense and Congress is groundwater contamination from firefighting foam. It's quite common around air bases and that, so that's a pretty important piece of that puzzle. The 2022 NDAA provides $500 million of funding for Defense Department to meet that requirement, and in addition, they must test facilities that are immediately adjacent to their facilities and downgrade it from identified military installations under the law. So they not only can test on base, they can test off base for any kind of damage that could be caused. And any federal agency, like the Army Corps, or private entity under contract with Defense, must complete its preliminary assessment before December 27, 2024. So they've given them several years, 2 years, under that particular act. It also directs DOD to adhere to the methods of measuring the amount of PFOS in drinking water that have been validated by EPA, in other words, in parts per trillion. So they have to use the same methodology that you do to measure PFOS. The law also creates mandatory public reporting obligations and disclose, basically they have to disclose their timelines and general location of the planned PFOS testing. So, you know, the Congress is very interested in this from the perspective of the military. In the FY23 bill that was just announced, there are several provisions that do build on the FY22 provisions of PFOS testing and reporting. So we're still looking at those, and of course that hasn't passed yet. We're hopeful it probably will, but we'll see. The next thing, though, is basically the EPA, which they're obviously the regulatory agency, and they have several actions that they've done on PFOS that are not militarily related. So with the comprehensive plan, the strategic roadmap, if you will, they've listed several accomplishments. It's about a year old now, and among the accomplishments are the proposal to regulate PFOS as a hazardous substance under the Superfund, that's CERCLA laws, creating a PFOS voluntary stewardship program, advancing the science to assess human health and environmental risks, which are important. We don't know what the impact of PFOS at what levels have on the human body, so we need to find that out. And then addressing PFOS in the Clean Water Act permitting, analytical methods, and water quality criteria and fish advisories. And they just announced guidance that came out to states, but basically on regulating PFOS in the MPDES permitting process. So that's, you know, something probably more focused on industrial discharges, but would also apply to MPDES permits for wastewater treatment plants as well. So earlier this year, EPA has announced they want to designate PFOS and PFOA, which are the two most prevalent types of PFOS, as hazardous substances under the Superfund law. And that carries some interesting and some concerning things that could affect Western. Of note, there's widespread concern among water agencies and the national trade associations like NACWA that PFOS that are included in biosolids processed by public water agencies could cause them to be considered responsible parties for the purposes of litigation wherever those biosolids are stored or placed. The state and national water agency associations have pushed back hard against this and urge EPA to issue exemptions to public water agencies for this purpose. EPA has responded by saying that they cannot legally exempt agencies, but that they will work with the agencies to find ways to protect them. So that's something we'll have to take to the bank. Anyway, we're watching that very closely. And they also have created advisories to, EPA has issued advisories to water agencies and have announced this formal rulemaking on what a de minimis level of PFOS would be out of an industrial section. That's out for public comment now. There's another rulemaking for PFOS and PFOA under the Safe Drinking Water Act to set criteria for that as well. So we're watching PFOS very closely. As you can see, it's a very complex issue, one that Congress is very interested in, and certainly one that Western is interested in as well. Also, we talked a little bit about the Defense Community Infrastructure Pilot. Western was a recipient of a $4.3 million grant for the MARB Water, Sewer, and Resiliency Grant. And in 2023, we applied again because the 4.3 was not quite the maximum that we could get for that project. However, we were not successful in that award. But it's clear to us that the 4.3 was a big win for us and certainly can help with that project. On WaterSmart, we currently have a Water Conservation Field Services grant application in. We helped with that, and that's for the demonstration projects on of installation of meters at pressure-reducing valves for increased water management projects. And then, obviously, with the EPA Stag Grant, the State and Tribal Assistant Grant, the FY22, we did get the $3 million in that bill. We are currently working with EPA Region 9 to open up those funds for us to use for the PFOS Phase 1 plant. Certainly, what EPA did was it took them a while to put the guidance out on how these funds could be delivered. And what they came up with was we had to apply as if it was a grant that we were going to compete for. And so that way the agencies cleared that, hey, look, these earmarks are good expenditures because they meet all our criteria. And so we're basically just going through those that paperwork now. Melissa, with your staff, is doing a great job of getting that teed up with EPA. We've sent in our first round of paperwork on that, and hopefully we'll see some success in getting that $3 million released for that particular Phase 1 of that project. So going to FY23 activities. Obviously, Upper Santa Ana HCP is still important because that deals with ESA issues on the sucker and some other things that are going on in the basin. The EPA Stag Community Project funding, obviously we're working on that, as we said, for FY22. If FY23 comes through, which we hope it will in the next weeks or couple weeks, then we'll be doing that all over again with EPA Region 9, but it should go more smoothly as their guidance has already been completed and released. The MARB DCIP grant implementation for that $4.3 million is ongoing. WaterSmart grants are always, like I said, they're always going to be on our radar, and certainly there's a lot of money out there that we want to chase for Western's use on those cost-share grants. We're also looking at that infrastructure legislation because there's so much funding there, and we want to make sure we're hitting on all cylinders when it comes to accessing that funding. Also, California water infrastructure funding is important because you're being able to use that as a match for a lot of this funding, and so that's important to have that source. And the state has put quite a bit of money out there for projects that we're working on. PFOS regulation, again, is something we're watching closely. And then outreach in the spring of 2023, we're looking forward to setting up meetings in D.C. with the delegation, with the committee's jurisdiction, and the agencies that we work with for Western to actually come out to D.C. again and have some in-person meetings. And we've done that in the past, and it's been very successful. You guys do a great job of really showing what Western's all about, and that's really important to have that kind of support and to have that face in D.C., especially when we're asking for some of these community project requests. And one other thing, you probably saw it in the news, but the new Republican Congress has gone through some of their new procedures and rules that they're going to have for the next Congress, in the 118th Congress in 2023. And they voted almost 2-1 to keep earmarks in place. We may see a little different procedure, and we may see basically a little bit more limited, limitations on who gets them and how much they are. However, I'm confident that Western is going to be very successful in whatever we ask for, because we're right on the cutting edge of providing significant water supplies to a significant part of California and significant economic and community development type approach. So in the 118th, the GOP majority is very slim. It's a 4-vote margin. So Mr. McCarthy, if he's chosen to be Speaker, which that's still up in the air as well, will not have many votes to play with. He's been nominated by the GOP, and a vote of the House will happen on January 3rd. From what I understand, he needs 218 votes. He did not get 218 votes when he was nominated. However, this is a whole different dynamic when you're talking about the entire House and the Democrat having a very close vote tally here to muck things up for him. So I look for the Republicans to pull together and elect him Speaker, but we'll see. Majority Leader for the Republicans is Steve Scalise of Louisiana, and Majority Whip is Tom Emmers of Minnesota. The Democratic Minority Leader is Hakeem Jeffries of New York, Minority Whip Catherine Clark of Massachusetts, and Caucus Chair Pete Aguilar of California. In the Senate, the December 6th runoff was yesterday. It looks like Mr. Warnock pulled out. A win, and so we now have 51-49 in the Senate. That's a huge difference from the 50-50 from last year. Under the 50-50, the committee assignments were split. They had equal numbers on the committees. They could have a tie vote and not have a committee report to the floor. There were several other things like staffing was equal. Now with a 51-49, that changes. Even though the Democrats controlled in the 50-50 because the vice president was Democrat and she could basically break any tie votes, the committees now are going to be leaning towards the Democrats in numbers, in staff, in budgets, just like in the House when things shift there. The other thing that it does do is take Mr. Manchin out of the catbird seat, and he no longer can can throw issues one way or the other. So it basically would put, if he were to side with the Republicans on an issue, it would go to 50-50, then the vice president would break the tie. So his power has been diminished substantially from the last Congress. So that is the main thing there. So I'd stand for questions. Again, it's always a pleasure to work with Western. You guys are top-notch water district, water agency, and like I say, it's an honor to be able to work with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Certainly appreciate you being out here from DC to give this report. We look forward to this every year and talk about our priorities. We did that just the other day to look at what we're going to be focusing on, what we need to concentrate on, and some funding opportunities that were also shared with us. So I also want to make sure that everyone knows Michael Hadley is our Government Affairs Officer in the building here. He works with both Mark at the federal level and at the state level when we had our update at the last meeting. So Michael does a great job keeping us apprised of everything that you guys have going on back there and making sure that we're aware of the challenges and the funding opportunities and a variety of different things. So bring that up to the dais to my colleagues while we have our federal lobbyist here. Is there anybody that has any questions whatsoever to ask Mark?
I had one question.
Certainly.
Thank you for being here, Mark. So the earmark project, you said that that's still not sure that if we're going to receive it, in case it went to 2023. Is it the Western Water Recycling Facility PFAS removal project?
Yes, the first earmark we did receive, and we're working on getting that, and that was the $3 million for the phase 1 of that PFOS removal and prevention project. The second earmark is for the second phase, which is a separate from the first construction phase. That's for the lining, I believe, and hopefully I'm not speaking out of turn here, but lining
That's
and
phase two.
repair of
That was
the-
pretty
of
good.
the lines in
You got it.
Marb, yeah. And that is, it's still before Congress. If the worst-case scenario is the full-year CR that would basically wipe it out, and we'd have to go back in 2024 and redo all that, which is fine, we can do that. But the issue here is really whether Congress decides to pass an omnibus bill or not. And then it doesn't mean that it would go to a full-year CR immediately. They would probably, if they can't come to agreement in the 117th Congress, it would just simply, they would push a CR into January to try to get something done in the coming weeks after the next Congress is seated.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay, other questions? You don't have any questions? Okay, all right, hey. Questions on the other side?
Mark, thank you. It was a great presentation. Do you have any sense as to whether there is any support in Congress for funding the advance work that's necessary to raise Shasta Dam? And then ultimately, of course, construction, but
Right. Well,
that's way down the road.
yeah, the Shasta Dam has been kind of a hot-button issue for some time.
Yep.
It's been politicized, if I may say politely. Yeah, the Republicans in California are for it, the Democrats are not, and the state is not for it. And there is a state law, from what I understand, that would preclude use of state funds to study that project, let alone construct it. But there are a couple of things with Shasta. It would provide a significant increase in storage. Basically, if you could fill it, it would provide a significant increase in storage, depending on what size it is. The other thing is there are some tribal issues in the upper reaches of that would have to be dealt with, as well as species. The third thing is who pays for it, because it's probably one of the more expensive projects that could be done in California to get to basically to increase water supply. One project that is a lot further along is the Sites Reservoir project, which can provide fairly significant, over 1 million acre-feet of additional storage in the basin. And I know Metropolitan's been a partner in that, as well as several other water districts that are looking at that. It's off-stream, so it's not as controversial as on-stream storage and raising facilities. But Director Gardner, that's pretty much what I know about Shasta. It has not, even when the Republicans did control both the House and Senate, they couldn't get it through. So it's difficult not to have the state supportive of it. The states are typically, really in charge of managing and developing their own water supplies. And,
Thank you.
Okay, other questions?
Nope, just thank you for being out here.
Okay, Mark, a couple of questions.
Sure.
If we could go back to slide 19.
Tell me when to quit.
It's for the 12 bills, the spending updates for continuing for the CR.
This one?
Yeah. So out of that, any idea how much we have at stake there? Because we have a lot of pending applications. Is there any funding other than the earmarks discussed? Is there any other funding that may be in jeopardy if this package doesn't move forward?
That's an excellent question, and I probably didn't cover that very well, but a lot of the funding that's going out for WaterSmart right now, and obviously we talked a lot about the earmarks, and I think you all know where we're at on that, but a lot of the funding that's coming out on WaterSmart is coming from the bipartisan infrastructure law. That funding has already been made available. It has it does not have to be appropriated again. So that funding is sitting there. The funding that is at risk is the funding for the earmarks or for the annual appropriations for reclamation, which is typically 60 million to 80 million for WaterSmart, all the programs in WaterSmart. So we're watching that closely, but as I said, they have 112 million that they're going to put on the street this year, just out of the bipartisan infrastructure law. Any other appropriated funding would be on top of that. So that
Okay.
funding is already there,
Okay.
and the ones we're applying for is probably coming out of that.
And on slide number 23, where we're talking about WaterSmart, new storage, these new programs that are put into place, we just got an updated list at committee for grants that have been awarded that we have, which was a significant dollar amount. If somebody could give me that, it's 38 million and change.
Just under 40 million, yeah.
Okay. And then we have pending grants applications, which were somewhere over 40?
50, just under 50.
Under, okay. So, yeah, good, because I didn't want to get the numbers mixed up. Out of all of those potentials, and this might be a Michael question too, out of all those potentials and all of these new programs, how many of these have we either one tapped and aren't eligible to go after anymore, or how many can we tap and go after would be a better question maybe. Does that, for this funding and these types of things, and have we submitted for these already? Or are we eligible to submit for these grant funding opportunities? Is that
Well,
does that question make sense?
no, it does
Okay.
not. What I'd
I can try to
say-
ask it a better way, sorry.
Sorry, honest.
I want to know if we can go after all of this money or if we already have.
Let me give you a snapshot of the process. So Mark and Chris, obviously, in the Ferguson Group, are very in touch with all the different pockets of funding.
Mm-hmm.
They are very good at passing those along to us. We get, I don't want to say daily updates, but at least a weekly update from the Ferguson Group of this huge list of funding opportunities. Then it goes to Michael and Melissa to try and figure out what fits for Western, and then there's a collaborative discussion with the Ferguson Group as to which of those funding options we actually have a shot at getting. So we're not going to spend a lot of staff time because we don't have a huge staff to do this. We're going after the best targets. And so we're very careful about that. But the other thing that we also do, and Tim and I were kind of talking, we were listening to you very carefully, Mark, but while we were talking, we end up coming up with ideas for other agencies that we support that should be going after some of these
Right.
fundings because it doesn't fit our project list and our CIP, but we know others that it does. So it's kind of this interactive process because there are so many funding opportunities out there that we wouldn't qualify for. So going through the application process just doesn't make sense.
No, well, I'll tell you where my mind went on this, and I was doing the same exact thing because when it came up to disadvantaged communities and some of the projects and coming forward with Rubidoux, that was my first thought. But one of the things that I wrote down for the new water storage was for our master plan, and we have some things that are done down in Marietta for our master plan that increases the water storage down there. But also the other thing in looking at SARCUP, would we be eligible to try, because there's still unfunded components that member agencies need to come up with that is about, what, $95 million of additional SARCUP?
Yeah, so SARCUP's on the state, that's state funding. And if they open up another round of funding, we do have projects that are ready for that.
Okay.
And one thing to add, from our perspective, we've expanded our grants staff significantly in DC. Actually, a lot of them aren't even in DC because they work remotely, they work virtually, but they're very qualified to look at applications and say, here's the funding opportunity announcement, here's the application, what are we missing? Where are we lining up? Where could we line up a little better? And the more you can do that in advance, like Craig was just saying, what we had a conversation here a few weeks ago on this, was the more you can kind of modify your projects to fit these grant programs, the more successful you're going to be, right? So, looking at all of the different aspects of the funding opportunity announcement, but also looking at, okay, we got new legislation that directs this funding to certain things. How can we build that in, even though it's not really out yet? How can we build those into our planning here to get those projects off the ground and funded? And it may not be with Western, like you said, it could be with another organization that you support, but we can help under our contract.
No, absolutely.
It's also important to note that our grants team does a good job for Western, but they also, on a monthly basis, send out a grant report to every single one of our retail agencies, every single month.
And that's exactly what my point is. I want to make sure that everyone is aware that we don't just look for this opportunity for us. We're trying to move it to other agencies that will also take burden off of us at some point too. If they're being able to diversify their portfolios, that's always a help to us as well. And I just want to make sure that people understand the dollar amounts that we're looking at and how successful staff has been and how successful you guys have been in assisting us with millions of dollars. I mean, we're looking at it's $90 million that we're staring at the face in, of half of which has been awarded to us and the other half we're still chasing down. I mean, this is a significant amount of dollars to take out the burden off of our customers. So I just want to make sure people are kind of really aware of the lift that staff is doing on this and how beneficial it is. And then the only other thing that I really wanted to talk about too was, and ask a question that's probably really unfair, but for the biosolids under the PFAS stuff and responsible parties, this really concerns me. Has there been anyone who's thrown a dollar amount of cost out there of what this potentially could mean for all water agencies that have this type of, I mean, that's not a small dollar.
Well, it's trillions of dollars, and there's all sorts of different, broad brush reports of what it could lead to. But a scientific study, no, not that I'm aware of. But it's huge money.
It's huge.
Well, I mean, and people need to understand that when we take a position to advocate against stuff like this, how harmful it could be to pass that cost on to the consumer, right? And so, I mean, that's why I was kind of curious, has anybody floated an actual dollar amount here? Because this could be very significant.
Well, one of the things I think on this type of thing, and I'm not a water quality scientist, but one of the things to consider is the fact that, yeah, we know PFOS is, at least at some level, is bad. And certainly something we don't want to have in our drinking water. Whether parts per trillion is the correct number, we have to live with that. But what are the impacts? And what if it is 1 part per trillion in biosolids that cost us millions of dollars just to get rid of under the CERCLA, under the Superfund law, and come to find out that it really didn't have any meaningful impact if it were to be allowed back in the environment. So those are the kinds of things that EPA is wrestling with now, I think. So, we want to find out from them, yeah, we hear you on the regulatory side, but what are you finding out on your research over here? What are we looking, are we at the right levels? Are we at too high, too low? What's the outcome to human health and safety? Mm-hmm. And the other thing is what we worry about too is on these biosolids, they go out, where do you take them? Well, a lot of them are land applied to farms. Well, does that go into the food supply? And at what level, or doesn't it? If it doesn't, then, and it's just tied up in the soil, what is the impact there? So there are a lot of questions, and I'm not sure the answers are there yet. And so I think those are some of the things that, going back to DC, talking to EPA, talking about what, some of our concerns on this level, is important that they hear from us on those kinds of things.
Certainly. So, no, and I appreciate that. So, and I know you guys are going to be watching this pretty significantly, because this could really impact us as in the future. And yeah, we definitely want to make sure that we can, keep our finger on the pulse of what's going on with this, for sure.
Well, and I think you brought up an excellent point, though. When you come back and say we're against this or that, it's not because we don't care about public safety. It's about doing the right thing in the right amount of prevention and protection. And so
right.
that's always going to be the balancing act that we do as water providers and as water treatment providers, is that you have to look at asking those questions, because we're using ratepayer funding to deal with it.
No, and I think that's an excellent point too, because I think one of the things that the public really needs to be cognizant and aware of is the fact that PFOS has been around for a very long time. It's testing now that has gone to a sophistication level to be able to calculate and be able to analyze it to the component that it's at this point. And so we've all been exposed to this for a very long time, and now we've just gotten sophisticated, just like DNA testing, right? I mean, and what you can calculate and what you can find out about somebody's, genetic makeup, because DNA testing has progressed so far now, and 20 years ago it wasn't even possible. So you're right, it is about doing and making sure that we're looking at the correct science and what the outlying effects may be, because this has been around for a very long time, and it's just now coming to our forefront for awareness.
That's exactly right. And I've quit reading all the emails that say I have new family members all over the place, so that's one. That's a DNA.
I hope you knew about that.
Well, thank you, Mark. I appreciate that, and I appreciate your updates. You do a great job for us. We've been very thankful of how successful we've been in being able to get the grant awards and the funding opportunities to take the burden off of our customers and to be able to continue doing the job that we do. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Okay. With that concludes our presentations. Is that correct, Mr. Miller?
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll go ahead and move on to our consent calendar. I will ask the question from any colleagues if there is any item you wish to discuss on consent.
Yes, sorry, I'm trying to find it. The item on the new legal counsel, I don't know the number. Sorry. 6F, please. Yes.
Okay, you'd like to pull for 6F for discussion? Anyone else? Hearing none. Okay, I'll go ahead and move to public comment. Is there anyone who wishes to comment on any consent calendar item today? Madam Secretary.
I see no request to speak.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Shouldn't we take the remainder of the consent calendar first?
Yes, President Instead, if we could vote on the the consent calendar, the remainder of the consent calendar, and then item 6F will be the first item heard under action agenda.
Okay, thank you.
I'll move to approve the consent calendar without item F.
Okay, I have a motion
Second.
to approve A through E.
A through E.
And a second from Director Gardner. Okay, any further comments? Go ahead and call for the vote.
Director Roten?
Yes.
Director Rizvi?
Yes.
Director Gardner?
Aye.
Director Torres?
Yes.
President Instead?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries 5-0 for items 6A through 6E.
Okay, thank you very much.
And Madam President, if I may, I would like to ask the board's permission to step down from the dais as this item is taken up, just to make it clear that I'm going to be participating, if at all, in my capacity as a partner of Best and Krieger, not as legal counsel for the district.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I thought he was
No,
going
I
to
was
come
just,
first.
I was just waiting for him to
Yeah,
walk
that's
off
what I
the.
was-
No,
That's
no,
what I was waiting for,
I was
too.
just waiting. So, Director Torres, your question on
Yes,
6F.
if we can just, I think because this is an extremely large partnership as far as funding, kind of go over why we are staying with BBK. One thing that I had asked in committee, and maybe I missed it in the letter, was why this did not go for bid, and being such and why a sole source contract. And then the last thing is, I just give a number. Again, didn't see it in the packet. I could have missed it. I try to go through it as quickly as I can. Is a rough idea of how much we spend with BBK annually? Those are just my 3 questions.
I'll start with the first question. So first and foremost, we did hear you, Director Torres. You did ask us to explain exactly why we did not go to bid. So I will read directly from the 3rd sentence in the detail section of the staff report. Following the board's actions to interview new BBK general counsel in successive closed sessions agendized on regular meetings of the board in late 2021, staff was instructed to pursue the development of a formal legal services agreement with Best and Krieger. So much of what you're asking was handled in closed session without staff present. Staff was then directed by the full board to actually go and develop an agreement. This agreement was not only prepared by Best and Krieger, but vetted by Gardner and Brandt. So it's not just a Best and Krieger product. It was reviewed by another set of legal counsel, as well as staff.
And how much?
So regarding the cost, it varies from month to month, but it could be anywhere between, and I'll turn to Kevin to correct me, anywhere between $10,000 and $20-some-odd thousand a month.
Those were just questions that I thought was important for the public to know. We have had Best and Krieger since the inception of this agency, but I think the more information out, the better, in my opinion. So, thank you. Those were my only questions.
Okay, thank you. Is there any member of the public who wishes to comment on this item, Madam Secretary?
I see no request to speak.
Okay, thank you very much. Director Torres, did you want to make a motion to approve?
I do not.
Okay, looking for a motion to approve 6F.
I'll motion to approve.
Okay, I have a motion from Director Roten. Looking for a second.
I'll second.
I have a director, excuse me, I have a second from Director Rizvi. Okay, we'll go ahead and call for the vote.
Director Roten?
Yes.
Director Rizvi?
Yes.
Director Gardner?
Aye.
Director Torres?
I'm going to vote no, and that is only because I don't think it's a good idea to have sole source contracts. I think it's best practice to put something like this out to bid. For some reason, we didn't have an actual agreement with BBK, whatever that was, but I thought that would be a great opportunity for us to do so. But they are great. They are a great legal counsel. I just in this item, and because of what I believe, I'm voting no.
President Dinstedt?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries 4-1 with Director Torres voting no.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll go ahead and have legal counsel join us back up on the dais, since he is going to be one of my next questions. Okay. Mr. Miller, for item 7, anything to be added or deleted from our agenda today?
Nothing to add today.
Okay, thank you very much. Legal counsel, congratulations on the award of the contract. Anything to add or delete from our agenda today?
Good morning, and on behalf of the firm and myself personally, thank you very much. I appreciate that, as well as your kind words, Board Member Torres. Nothing to add.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to our action agenda this morning. We will start with 8A. Mr. Miller?
Yeah, thank you. Item 8A is to adopt a resolution 3258 establishing the Arlington Desalter water rate for fiscal year 22-23. So you met the team that operates the plant. This is water that we set a price on for Norco. We go through this every year. And I'll turn it over to Kevin. Kevin and Rod have been negotiating this on an annual basis with the city of Norco.
Great, thank you, and good morning. So Resolution 3258 attached to this letter sets the rate at $1,168 per acre foot. This is a $50 or 4.5% increase from the prior fiscal year. And this rate is based on the delivery of 4,400 acre feet contractually agreed to by the city of Norco, which is the Desalter's primary customer, and is based on the revenue requirement from Western's current fiscal year operating budget and Western's capital improvement and facilities plan. The City of Norco has reviewed and agreed to the proposed rate with a retroactive effective date of July 1, 2022. And that concludes staff's report.
Okay, thank you very much. Madam Secretary, is there anyone wishing to comment on this item?
I have no requests to speak at this time.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mascaro, is there anyone that was joining us from Norco or the agency involved?
No, not to my knowledge.
Okay, thank you very much. I didn't see that note, but I thought I'd ask just in case. Okay, bring it back to the dais for discussion from my colleagues. Any questions of staff? Okay.
No questions, but I'll move approval.
Okay, I have a motion to approve from Director Gardner,
I'll second.
and I have a second from Director Roten.
My only question was for Director Roughton, and this is her in her district, and so it sounds like she's okay with the item. That was my only question.
Yes.
Okay. All right, any other questions? Okay, we'll go ahead and call for the vote, Madam Secretary.
Thank you. Director Roten?
Yes.
Director Rizvi?
Yes.
Director Gardner?
Aye.
Director Torres?
Yes.
President Denstedt?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries 5-0.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item 8B.
All right, thank you. Item 8B is to adopt Resolution 3252, approving a water supply assessment for the Jefferson Marietta Apartments project. This is something that went through Engineering and Operations Committee on Monday. Our normal practice is not to bring it to the board immediately, but there is a time urgency on this item. And so Mallory is here to go through the presentation for the whole board because some weren't able to attend the Engineering Committee meeting. So Mallory, all yours.
Thank you. Good morning, directors,
Good morning.
staff, and members of the public. Before I get started, I do believe we have some guests online virtually. We have William Morrison from JPI Companies, Connor Clopel from JPI Companies, Amy Grant from Fusco Engineering, and Brian Smith from Fusco Engineering. And this item is to approve the resolution for the water supply assessment for the Jefferson Marietta apartment complex. And before I get started too, just as a reminder of why we do this, it's part of the CEQA process. Western is required to provide an analysis of current and projected supplies compared to the estimated water demands for the projects meeting certain criteria under SB 610. Now, the criteria varies, but it can be the number of floor space by square footage, number of hotel rooms, number of residential units, or number of employees. And agencies, once we get the request, we have up to 120 days from when we receive the request to complete the analysis and adopt the resolution. And this is the project description of the area. It is a multi-family residential community apartment complex. It's located on the northeast corner of Jefferson Avenue and Marietta Hot Springs Road. And this is, you may recall, a few months back, we brought forth an extension to an agreement from 1999 where we had annexations in the city of Marietta, the 41st Fringe area under Western, and we annexed the properties at one time, and then they pay the annexation fees as they come online for water service. So it's a unique agreement, but this project is within that area, and it's also being annexed in the process with Metropolitan is currently underway. And as I mentioned, it's a residential community over 26 acres on 2 parcels. There is slated to be 851 apartment units, ranging from 1 bedroom to 3 bedrooms. And it is designated as a very high-density land use area. It's going to be 4-story buildings, and the estimated water demand for this project is 289 acre-feet per year. Now, that's 276 acre-feet per year slated for indoor demand, and that is based on a 290 gallons per day per unit estimation. And the outdoor is going to be about 13 acre-feet per year based on low and medium use shrubs, water use shrubs in the outer areas and within the parking areas and also within common areas. So a little more information about the document itself. The project itself has over 500 residential units, which is why it was triggered for the WSA. Once we received the request, the City of Marietta is the lead environmental agency for this project under CEQA. Once we received that request, Western is required to furnish the WSA per the Senate Bill 610 legislation. Now, in the WSA, there are 3 types of hydrologic scenarios that we have to look at and analyze. One is the normal year hydrology, in which there is no reductions to the metropolitan water supply to Western, and we have all of our local water projects in effect. The second is a single dry year scenario, where there's a 10% reduction in metropolitan supply to Western, and again, all of our local projects are still intact. And then finally, a multiple dry year scenario, where it's a 20% reduction in metropolitan imported water supplies to Western, and all of our local projects are intact. And then we compare that to the estimated demand of the project and all of our other planned uses. And as a reminder too, the City of Marietta must determine, based on the WSA and all the other environmental documents, whether the project moves forward. So we're just supplying to them this information, and they will make the final decision. So this slide here is that multi-dry year hydrology I was discussing, one of the 3 scenarios. This is kind of our worst case scenario, so this is why we're showing it to you today, showing what our reduction in metropolitan supplies would be, all of our local water supplies, what the estimated demand for this project is, plus of our other demands, and showing at the bottom here, the very bottom line is the surplus. We still have a surplus, showing that even in a long-term dry period, there are, among our other local supplies, we'll have sufficient supplies to meet the project's projected demands, as well as our other planned uses. And with that, I will recommend that we adopt Resolution 3252 to approve the water supply assessment.
All right, thank you, Mallory.
Sure.
We're happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and move to public comment first. Is there any member of the public who wishes to comment on this item?
I see no request to speak.
Okay. Are there any comments from our guests on the project?
I don't believe so.
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, bring it back for staff questions. Any questions from my?
Staff doesn't
sorry.
have any questions?
Any questions to staff?
Valerie
Sorry.
answered all of our questions earlier.
Okay. Bring that to my colleagues. Any questions of my colleagues to staff?
No questions. Actually, real quick question, Mallory. I know we discussed this in committee, but can you tell us the process of this? We are providing this to City of Marietta, and how is it gonna work? Then we're just providing this report to them. They get the project approved, and they come back to us. How does that work?
Correct. So as far as the WSA is concerned, yeah, we get the request, supply the WSA within the allotted amount of time, send it to the City of Marietta for their incorporation into the entire CEQA document. And I do have a little bit of information about their timeline. I believe they said that they would have the mitigated negative declaration within the 4 to 5 month range, and a public hearing for the project within April 30th, 2023. And then it will come back to Western at some point for development services. I don't know if we can speak to how that.
That's right. So then, after they get through the CEQA process with the city, and if it gets approved, then they would come back to us with an actual analysis of how we would serve them. We would give them the requirements that Western has to obtain service, and that would be what we commonly refer to as a will serve letter. As long as the developer complies with everything in the will serve letter, then we would provide service to them.
And this is outlined in the actual document that is attached to the board letter. It does say that this WSA is not a commitment to serve the proposed project, but a review of Western's total projected water supplies based on the information presently available. The WSA and the analysis and the conclusion herein are conditioned on Metropolitan ability to continue to supply imported water to meet Western requirements, including the requirements for the proposed project. The proposed project is subject to any special or additional requirements imposed by Metropolitan or Western. So.
And I think Mallory did a nice job of laying out the different scenarios that she goes through when she analyzes. We all know in the back of our head that it's very dry.
Right.
And we're all preparing up here for it being very dry, and here we have a project before us, but that is exactly what Mallory's gone through. It's looked at different amounts of cutbacks, and that's the analysis process. And, you know, we've looked at that, and this is in, it fits within those scenarios.
Okay,
Thank you, Mallory. Thank you.
okay. Other questions?
Move to approve.
Sorry, if, I have one question,
Sure, go
sorry. Mallory, can you please give us an indication how you came up with 290 gallons per day for the units?
Sure. So that was actually in the request received, but it did come from the design and supply criteria from Eastern Municipal Water District. They have something on their, as part of their development services, a list of gallons per dwelling unit for very different types of land use. So this was considered very high density because it has 17 to 20 units per acre, more than 17 to 20 units, dwelling units per acre. So it was designated as very high density, and that equated to the 290 gallons per day.
Okay. And then can you describe how you assess the outdoor watering requirements for the area that they're proposing? Because it's a pretty significant size.
Sure. Yes. Again, that comes via the request. However, we do check it, and they supplied what's called a California Water Use Efficiency Landscape Worksheet, where it shows you, it's available to landscape architects, landscapers, where you put in square footage of the landscape, how it's going to be irrigated, drip irrigation, overhead irrigation, and the type of plants or shrubs or turf. So it's low water use shrubs, medium water use shrubs, and it makes those calculations to determine the estimated total water use on an annual basis. So we checked that, they supplied that to us per request, and we confirmed that those calculations were correct and accurate.
Mallory's referring to the Model Water Use Efficiency Landscape Ordinance that has been adopted by the County of Riverside, as well as the City of Murrieta. And those requirements statewide, the maximum allowable water is between 45 and 55% of evapotranspiration, much lower than our budgets allow. So this is a very water efficient landscape.
Okay, thank you. And in the past, this has obviously been a change of density project that popped up. So you took that into consideration, because when we do our master plan, when they do their general plan advisory committees, and we know what the zoning requirements are, this obviously was a huge change in density because this is not what the way that it was zoned originally. So you take that into consideration when you are assessing all of the WSA for now, this change of density for this particular project, but how that would affect the rest of that area, correct?
Yes, but we also looked to, I believe we chatted about it in the committee meeting too, that this particular project is being applied for under the SB 330, which allows for a general, if the use is consistent with the overall general plan, then there wouldn't have to be a change in zoning, but yes, it is taken into consideration.
Right, but I just want to make sure that the public is aware that we look at all the zoning and we look at what our infrastructure and our master plan is as we calculate things out. And when these types of things change, it changes that structure and that plan for us. So we kind of go back to the drawing table a little bit to make sure that we account for those changes moving forward.
Yeah, so you're getting into kind of a master planning issue for our long-term service. So we absolutely watch that very carefully, and we work with the city. And that's a water resources department to planning department element. But we absolutely watch that, because if zoning changes dramatically, we have a master plan that was, and Ryan just finished doing the master plan for the Murrieta area, and we're doing it for the Riverside area right now. So we do have to make sure that it's in compliance, but that's kind of our task with the city behind the scenes to make sure they're aware of that before they approve these projects, because they're the ones that are doing the zoning and the specific plan, not us. We get a project to evaluate. But we like to do the groundwork ahead of time so we don't get projects that are way off base from what we anticipated the plan would be.
Right, no, and that's my point, is that we didn't anticipate this because this didn't exist. This is a change, and so I just wanted to make sure that we were clear that as we move forward and changes happen like this, especially significant ones like this, that we're making accommodations and we're accounting for it as we move forward with our master plan development and how our structure is going. Okay. No, thank you, Mallory. I appreciate that information and answering those questions.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. With that, now would be the appropriate time for motions.
Okay, I move to approve.
Okay, I have a motion to approve from Director Rizvi.
I just seconded.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. A second from Director Torres. Okay, any other questions? We'll go ahead and call for the vote.
Director Roten?
Yes.
Director Rizvi?
Yes.
Director Gardner?
Aye.
Director Torres?
Yes.
President Dinstead?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries 5-0.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, moving on to our action agenda item C. Legal counsel.
Yes, good morning, members of the board. This item is the second step in a two-step process that is called for under our board municipal ordinances. As the board will recall, the board first considered this item at the November 2nd, 2022 meeting. We brought it back at the November 16th meeting, at which time the board authorized district staff and legal counsel to bring back a resolution, a draft resolution for the board's consideration, potentially censuring board member Torres. As I mentioned at the November 16th meeting, it's important to remember kind of what a censure is and what a censure is not. A censure really is just an expression of the board's disapproval of one of their board members' conduct. It is not a formal legal proceeding. It's not a civil proceeding or a criminal proceeding. It's a legislative action that legislative bodies have expressed for several centuries. As I also mentioned at the November 16th meeting, there was a recent United States Supreme Court case that clarified and for First Amendment purposes announced that a censure is itself an expression of the board's First Amendment rights. And so under our censure policy, board members are expected to conduct their public deliberations and processes in an atmosphere of mutual respect and civility. Our code also says that board members are expected to be independent, impartial, and responsible to the people they represent and conduct themselves in a manner that is above reproach. As outlined in the November 16th board materials, there are about 8 items or instances of conduct where board member Torres' conduct arguably does not meet those standards in our censure ordinance. And so we've brought back a proposed resolution that identifies those 8 instances of conduct and proposes a censure, again, an expression of disapproval from the board of her conduct. The resolution does not impose any sanctions. Our ordinance allows the board to consider sanctions such as removal from officer positions, removal from committee assignments, liaison assignments, reimbursement for travel. The proposed resolution does not contain any of those. Instead, it reserves the right of the board to consider this censure in any future actions with regard to those potential consequences. If the board would like, you're certainly free from a legal perspective to act on those sanctions, as our ordinance calls them, today, if you wish. But I just wanted to point out that the resolution doesn't do that. And so if the board wants to take it in a different direction, we'd like direction from you on that. And then finally, per the board's direction, this resolution, in addition to the agenda being sent to Ms. Torres, Board Member Torres last week, the resolution itself was separately emailed to her ahead of time so that she had a chance to look at it. So that concludes my staff presentation. I'm certainly available to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. At this time, we'll go ahead And this is the opportunity for Director Torres to make any comments that she has in relationship to what has been presented, and then we'll move to public comment. Director Torres.
I'll defer to public comment after the public comment. Thank you.
Actually, Director Torres, our standard operating procedure is for you to go ahead and make comments because the public has the right to be able to hear what you have to say and then respond to it accordingly during their public comment. So if you'd like to go ahead and make a statement, that would be this time it would be appropriate.
Okay, my statement is that I'll defer until after public comment I have a lot that was thrown at me and just last week, but I know in our the original motion that was made, it was asked that legal counsel give me enough time to be able to prepare, which I worked extensively, even though I have a full-time job. I have these duties. We had Aqua. I had a lot going on. Unfortunately, I was only given 4 days to review this package. Luckily, it was posted earlier, so I did get to see it then, but legal counsel only provided it to me on Saturday. So I would like to either have this be continued to give me more time, or otherwise I'll wait until after public comment to give what I was able to prepare in such a short amount of time.
Well, Director Torres, the public does have a right to hear what you have to say so that they can change whatever comment they want to make. That's why I wanted to afford you the opportunity. The information, as I understood it, legal counsel put forward is essentially a duplication of the packet that came out all the way back in November 16th for our meeting that was posted ahead of that agenda. So there is no additional, at least in my reading of the information that's been put forward, there aren't any additional items that were added after the original packet of information came out for November the 16th. Am I correct in that?
That's correct. The language in the resolution in terms of the kind of alleged misconduct is almost verbatim from the November 16th meeting, and a lot of it was also in the November 2nd meeting as well.
Okay, thank you. Director Torres.
Madam Chair, Director Torres reminds me that I had specifically asked for there to be sufficient time for Director Torres to respond. Previously, I'm having trouble understanding how there wasn't sufficient time, and I think that might be worth some discussion before we move forward. I understand your procedural perspective that now is the time for Director Torres to make her statement if she's going to make one, so that the public can digest that and incorporate anything she may have to say into their comments. And I think that is appropriate. But I do think it would be fair for Director Torres to be able to explain what's new that she feels she did not have sufficient time to prepare for today's meeting.
Yeah, so the original, and I think we had asked I had asked for this as well as several members of the public to present actual findings. There were two closed session items in there that it wasn't clear that if that means now we waive the Brown Act requirements on those. There was nothing different, no different findings. I know there are allegations of harassment, but there is no investigation or findings of an investigation. And I can go through, but I would prefer to hold up my what I prepared until during our discussion time. But regardless, that I expected a new board packet with findings as you had prescribed in your motion. And then again, sufficient amount of time to prepare. So I couldn't have known that it was going to be an identical board packet unless I had gotten a sufficient amount of time to see that. And so I waited to prepare until I received the packet. Otherwise, if I'd have known it was going to be identical, which probably could have been given to me at an earlier time, I would have been able to prepare. And I think based on the allegations that were not, I just put in this document, but also read in the letter from Director Denstead last week, which I think that letter should have probably been included in the package so I could also address the things that she alleged. I think just in all fairness would have been, and not only that, aside from fairness, it is what you motioned for and was voted on.
Legal counsel, would you like to respond to any of that?
I do recall Director Gardner requesting advance notice. We got it to Director Torres as soon as it was finalized. And given that it's very similar language, it seems that if the board wished to, it would be reasonable to conclude that she had sufficient time between Saturday and today to prepare some sort of a response. Ultimately, it's up to the board in terms of whether you want to take the action today or continue it.
Okay, thank you. In regard to my statement that I read, those were my notes for myself that I decided to write out ahead of time, just like oral comments. They're just like your statements that you've never provided to us in writing that you read off of your phone or any other comments that you make a notation for yourself. That was not a formal letter that was indicated. Those for my comments being charged with the presiding officer to be able to make those comments in relationship to the packet. So it was not a formal letter that was issued or any such. It was simply my comments that I chose to write down for my notation's sake. And they certainly were available in the recording should they want to be replayed at any point in time, and I never received a request to provide anybody in addition with those comments, just like the comments that you've made in prior meetings have not been provided to the rest of the board, to my knowledge, at least not to me. Comments from my colleagues in relationship to carrying forward or continuing this item?
Madam President, I would be interested in comments from other board members as to whether they believe that in this situation with the documentation being almost virtually identical, additional time is warranted. If the board desires to provide additional time, we could do that. We have in the audience a number of people who have other things to do, and they have been here in prior meetings. If we put it over, I expect they would want to come to a future meeting. I don't know how many people are online, but I suspect there are several who have been waiting. So I see an advantage for public involvement in moving forward and not dragging this out. But if the board feels that there really has not been sufficient time for Director Torres to digest the documentation of the issues and formulate a response to that, then we can put it off. So I would be interested in just a perspective from other board members, whether they think we have a fairness problem and not allowing Director Torres more time really disadvantages her. I'm personally not convinced that that's the case.
Okay, thank you. Other comments?
Were you told that it is the same package, or were you told that there's gonna be, I was not sure, I don't remember that you were told that there's gonna be new information or any other.
I wasn't, but the motion that Director Gardner made that day was to create a resolution with findings. Nothing was different, so I expected findings or something different. Otherwise, yes, I would have prepared ahead of time with what I had if I'd known it was going to be virtually similar. But again, was only given, well, if you don't count today, 3 days to prepare for this. And no, it was not enough time to do so. And that is the honest truth. So there's a lot, again, that was alleged, and apparently, it was alleged during comments, and then as well as the 7 or 8 items that are listed here that I really needed to go back, look at notes. We don't have, we have a short frame of the things that we keep in email, so I had to go through and look through my stuff. Never mind the 4 years of worth of work that's happened up here. So it really wasn't enough time. I prepared as best as I could with the amount of time, but not, quite frankly, it wasn't enough time. So I am asking that this be continued.
Other comments?
Okay, so I do believe there was enough time. However, to err on the side of courtesy to another board member, I would be in agreement to continue this, as much as I think dragging this out is hurting the agency, all of us up here, all of you who've taken time out of your day to come and speak. If it is continued, I don't know what the legality is about public comment, but I know a lot of times in a public hearing, which this is not, the public comment then also gets delayed to whatever the public hearing date is going to be. So that would be legal counsel. I'm having a hard time thinking that there wasn't enough time. This has been discussed. This is our 3rd meeting that we've had about it. And the longer we drag it out and it gets printed on an agenda and it gets put wherever it gets put and spread and gossiped about and all of that, it's not good for any of us, including Director Torres. So I would be willing to continue it one more time to give her that courtesy, but I don't know how the public comment issue is resolved.
So in answer to your question, because it's on the agenda, the public is entitled to comment if they wish. They get their standard allotted time.
Okay.
And yeah, I was going to say if we do make, or if there's a motion or whatever the action is, public should get the time. But I am being incredibly frank and that I did not have enough time, not with my family obligations, with my work obligation. My poor husband was trying to get everybody ready this morning. I was up until 4 a.m, slept for 20 minutes, trying to prepare. So I'm telling you, it was unfortunately not another time. And I thought it was very clear that there would be findings in the package. There are no findings in the package. So I was expecting a different package. And then that I would be given enough time to do so. The most amount of time was that when it was posted. Otherwise, it wasn't. So that is my ask.
Madam President, two quick things. First, I think the whereases are essentially findings. So I think we're speaking semantics there. A question for legal counsel: if there is a motion and a second to carry this over to a future meeting, wouldn't public comment be limited to that motion if we do not take up the primary objective?
So first, I would recommend that public comment be taken before the board takes action. So you can make a motion in a second if you wish, but before final action is taken, I'd recommend public comment be allowed. And the public comment would be limited to, would be allowed as broadly as the agenda description is, so they could talk about continuing, or if they want, they can talk about the substance of it. You are right that the recitals are findings. In fact, section 1 of the resolution says the board hereby adopts the recitals set forth above as its factual findings supporting this resolution. So those are intended and clearly stated are the findings of the board.
And I think you're right. It's an issue of semantics. But again, I didn't see the resolution until Saturday. Well, technically, I did see it Friday, but it was not emailed to me until Saturday. So I didn't have enough, I really just didn't have enough time to address what was given to me. And I do just want to point out that that was the motion that you made and was voted upon, was that I would be given enough time, and I wasn't. So that's all I'm asking for.
Okay, other comments? My comment at this time is going to be, yes, this has been on the agenda a couple of times. Yes, we've had discussions in closed session pertaining to essentially this issue. We've had a large gap in between the December 16th meeting, which was 3 weeks, which is longer than we normally have, just because there was an extra week in November, just because of how the month rolled out. And so I think I agree with my colleagues. I believe that there was ample amount of time for Director Torres to be able to prepare and answer these types of questions. I think it's terribly inconvenient for the public who have come out here to make comments and taken time and now waited a great deal of time also, and to try to carry this forward. So having said that, I will go ahead under the direction of legal counsel to take public comment at this time, if that is what you deemed appropriate, legal counsel.
I believe so, yes.
Okay. At this time, we'll go ahead and move to comments from members of the public. If you have requested to speak on this item and you are in the room, if you could please turn in a comment card to the board secretary indicating your wish and desire to speak under public comment for this. If there are members of the public online today joining us via Zoom who wishes to make a comment publicly on that, would you please raise your hand on the Zoom feature so that we can identify that you wish to speak publicly on this item moving forward, so we may get a head count so we can determine the amount of time being afforded to folks should we have a tremendous amount of people who wish to comment on this. Madam Secretary, if you could go ahead and take a quick cursory look on Zoom to see if there are members of the public on Zoom who wish to comment on this item, and then give me a count for the Zoom and for the members of the public that are in the room who have turned in a comment card.
President Dinstead, at this time, there are currently 3 hands raised in the Zoom chat, and I have 12 comments written or for members of the public who are in the audience. So that would be a total of 15 as of this moment. That could increase as we move forward.
Okay. Legal counsel, in terms of getting our count at this point, because we're close to a threshold that we've set for this board, if we have 20 people and we allow 3 minutes apiece, we're rolling into an hour. So can I do a final call for public comments online should people choose? I would recommend that you raise your hand at this time so we can include you in the count, and you can be called upon for public comment. If you choose to raise your hand and not make a public comment, no harm, no foul. But we would like to get a count of those that may potentially be interested in making a comment online so that the board secretary can document you and put you in the queue for public comment. So we'll do a last call on Zoom for any interested parties wishing to make public comment on this action item.
I see no additional hands raised at this time. We have a total of 15.
Okay, thank you very much. At this time, we'll go ahead and move to public comment. Madam Secretary, if you could go ahead. We will, with 15 total comments, we will leave the comments at 3 minutes.
Thank you. President Dinstead, do you wish to start with members in the audience or members on Zoom?
Why don't we go ahead and start with the members in the audience who have been here waiting?
Thank you. At this time, I'll call Stephen Figueroa.
Good afternoon. First, my family too comes from line of veterans, Mrs. President. My dad was a disabled U.S. Marine. My brother was a Bronze Star winner in Vietnam. Mike knew my cousin, Mike Figueroa, who was not only a Bronze Star and other out of Vietnam, and my mom's uncle was a D-Day guy in World War II. So we know that they fought for our freedom to speak here. And I must remind legal counsel to educate them on Baca versus Moreno, because now calling law enforcement by you two is unbelievable. Mike, you know me. I've been there to back you up when Rusty Bailey was suing you. And the Riverside Council was against you, accusing you of doing stuff to employees and staff members. And you called to rally for support. All right, and nobody limited you got a fair investigation. And Brenda, the hypocrisy of saying she has to speak now, none of you routinely speak. You wait till all we speak, and then you wait to the end of the meeting to give your comment all the time anyway. You do that. That's just normal practice. And to restrict people from contacting their constituents while you're in a meeting, there might be important stuff going on to the electronic use. That's a First Amendment violation. I would urge you to give them, it is, and I would be willing to challenge it if I want to contact somebody. It would be a First Amendment, because all over people contact their people while they're on the board, city councils. It happens all the time, all right? And this ambush that you're doing to Gracie is unbelievable. And there's no other word to speak about. Brenda, you spoke for, unlimited time attacking her, violating the very ethics that you're citing. Go back and everybody review what was read for 30 minutes. And for that, because the other gentleman lost the race and called her a stain, that is racist. People of color are routinely called a stain and other names. And that's, my skin is brown. Does that make me a stain because I'm up here speaking? If you can't see that's racism, then you really need an ethics class. All of this whole board needs an ethics class. This is like watching a Spanish novela with all the gossip. This is a water board. All the gossip behind the scenes, I agree. It's unbearable. The whole county knows about it all the way to Sacramento. You should be ashamed of yourself. You really should. It's an embarrassment. Instead of doing education workshops for our kids in school and water reduction plans, like a simple timer on a water hose so that we can't waste our water, what are you doing? You spend hours and hours and call law enforcement. I want to know how much money this is costing us. If you think we're afraid to be arrested, go for it. We're people of color. If I have a cell phone, all the time you're going to say it's a gun anyway. So, this is ridiculous.
Thank you for your comment. I'll call Paul Rodriguez.
Thank you. It's tough to follow that act, but I'll try. My name is Paul Rodriguez. I'm a Western customer and served on the Temescal Valley Water District Board for many years. Temescal is a wholesale customer with a vested interest in a regional water supply. Public posturing and agency bashing does nothing for water reliability and cost containment. That opportunity lies with good governance, team member commitment, and customer engagement. The item before you today is unfortunate and should never be necessary. Any suggestion that this action will curb free speech is false and seeks to mask a pattern of customer contempt and voter pandering. I would like to share my observations from the past few months in the hopes that highlighted behaviors change and Western's board can return to 100% effectiveness. Staff prepared a 2-year budget and presented recommendations during 2 workshops in May. On June 1st, Director Torres moved approval of the item and voted in favor. Shortly thereafter, during community meetings, she claimed that Western continues to be guilty of wasteful spending without offering any examples or solutions. On July 20th, staff presented the staff-mandated water quality report as part of the robust regulatory requirements all water agencies must follow. Director Torres had no questions about the report and provided no assurances to the public that Western's water is safe. At subsequent community meetings, Director Torres suggested that she was uniquely qualified to test water and ensure that customers are safe despite the many professionals at Western that have this responsibility. During the recent election, Director Torres filed a ballot designation worksheet listing job titles that were determined to be false or misleading. During the November 2nd board meeting, she explained that she chose not to challenge the findings because she didn't want a bunch of men in a back room deciding her qualifications. The registrar of voters is a woman, as are many of her staff. This was a deliberate attempt to avoid accepting responsibility for ethical misconduct. Finally, Western has had drought discussions and development of solutions statewide. Craig Miller presented the campaign at a Raglan community meeting on August 17th and to the Woodcrest MAC on November 10th. During the September Raglan meeting, Director Torres was asked what Western was doing to address the drought. She told the audience that Western's focus was on a new logo. During the Woodcrest presentation, she had nothing constructive to offer. These are not isolated instances. Western has had a challenging 4 years with the tragic loss of 2 board members, a worldwide pandemic, and record-breaking drought conditions. Having a board member that has flaunted self-promotion at the cost of good governance is appalling. As a customer and resident of Division 2, I sincerely hope this offensive and irresponsible behavior changes. I honestly hope that she's successful in the next 4 years. It'll help us all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. At this time, I'll call Alan Shanahan.
Good morning, President Denstad, members of the board. Alan Shanahan, so I'm also a ratepayer here living in Woodcrest. I've been speaking numerous times, and I'm here specifically to speak on 8C. Mr. Rodriguez, appreciate your comments, but those are the same comments you've repeated that really don't carry water with a lot of us that actually attend community meetings on a regular basis, not just in the last year when we're running for office. As somebody that is very active in the Woodcrest community, it is important that our elected official not be censured. If you're going to take further action other than using a narrative that says you could take future action, you need to be transparent and open with the public. If you plan on having any impacts to her holding another role, possibly board president, eliminating those options, you need to let the public know. Ms. Torres has nearly 90% of all the ratepayers in her district. So you are silencing our voice if you try and silence her voice. As somebody that's very involved in the community, she is accessible. She listens to us, even when we don't disagree, even when we disagree. She has no problem being there for the community. She has been there in the community for the last 4 years. When her and I ran against each other 4 years ago, the first thing she did was show up to a Woodcrest meeting. She made sure she was there to listen, and she represents the ratepayers' voices. Now, yes, there may be a few people that say they don't agree, but they are the minority. The election results show otherwise. She has done a good job. She is still doing a good job, and she does not deserve to be censured. Further, you need to disclose if you're having conversations about further actions beyond what this resolution says for transparency's sakes, because we know the conversations happen. Lastly, I want to address the time frame that she has to respond. President Denstad, you're on the MWD board. If you were investigated, there would be an ethics investigation that's done by an impartial party. Results and factual findings would be produced. You would then have 30 days to respond to those results. You should extend that same courtesy to Director Torres, so she has the ability to review, investigate, and defend herself, have true due process, because that's what our country's about. That's what our veterans fought for and our military. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I'll call Debbie Walsh.
Really
really didn't have a prepared speech, but I've known Gracie Torres for quite a while now, and she has actually been one of the best directors that we've had for Western. Actually represents the people of our communities, has gone to numerous meetings. She came up to our community of Lake Matthews and we have a large nursery up there, and it's been polluting the water up there. And we also had a trail up there, original trail. And Gracie was very receptive coming up there, went over the whole issues, and very much supportive of all the residents up there. They love her, and they really support her because she actually represents the community and represents the people up there who have been basically paying out the nose for water for quite a while. And they don't feel it's very fair what they're paying, almost twice as much as Eastern Water Company charges. So anyway, we don't feel that this censure is warranted. We don't feel that this is something that should be done. She needs to have 30 days to look this over, and I agree with Ellen Shanahan. We had a trail up there. She actually went through the whole issue that we have. She's very receptive to all the customers. 90% of the ratepayers live in her district, and she always is the one who goes and above and beyond to address their issues. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I'll call Alex Cortez.
Morning, esteemed Western Municipal Water Board members. I'm Alex Cortez. I'm a resident of the Casablanca neighborhood. I'm a father, a scientist, an educator, and an active community member. As a customer and a neighbor in your district, I urge you not to take any actions that may sanction Director Torres, that you don't issue any resolutions to censor her. As evidenced by her reelection, 60%, 2 out of 3 of the voting public side with her and believe in the job that she's doing. What that tells me is that a censorship is not supported by the ratepayers and is gravely misplaced. Thank you for your time and taking my comments into consideration. Have a good day.
Thank you. I'll call Corinne Parker.
Good morning, board members. Hello, Mike. I haven't seen you in a while, but I have to say, my name is Corinne Parker. I live in the Mission Grove area, and I'm a customer. And I came here not knowing a whole lot about what's going on. I read the resolution. I'm shocked. It seems to be minor things that I don't understand why you are all spending so much time doing this, and it appears that you're all picking on one board member. I don't know the reason, but this does not look good, and it really upsets me. And I'm surprised, Mike, that you were part of this. I can't comprehend, and I do not want my water board to be focusing on something as trivial as this. I want somebody like Gracie on this board. I want somebody to ask questions. I want somebody to point out issues that would be important to us. All we want is safe water. We want safe water to drink. We want safe water to use. We don't want you to spend your time picking on a board member because of what? I still can't understand. Her behavior. I want somebody like Gracie on this board, and I hope you understand that this is something that the ratepayers would prefer. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll call Maribel Nunez.
Hello, my name is Maribel Nunez. Mike Gardner, you're my water board member. And I think, I spoke last time, so I just wanted to ditto to what I said before. And I think that I was also expecting new information that was said at the last board meeting, and I didn't see anything. And then if there's going to be accusations, I don't see any dates or when things happened or didn't happen. And then the DA has confirmed that an investigation of the allegation is warranted. So we need to, if there's anything out there, then we need to give time for that investigation. But if not, like I said, as a ratepayer customer, I don't want you to waste time doing this. I do ask that you please just move forward. Like I said, the election's already happened. The voters already voted for Gracie. And I don't know, I know we had a candidate here that is here and complaining or whatever. I'm like, the voters didn't vote for you. They voted for Gracie. So let's give it a rest and let's get things going. We need to talk policy. I'm excited to hear about, folks coming from Washington. Spend time with that, not this BS. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Frank Montez?
Good afternoon, board members and members of the community. First of all, if you're going to proceed with the censure, there's a couple of you that should also be censured with comments like, we're going to teach her a lesson. We don't like the way she talks. And I've said it before that this is retaliation and racist. Brenda, you yourself described a fellow member of the community when she was running for office as that Mexican lady. You, Laura, in the last meeting said perception is reality. Well, the perception is that this is retaliation and racist. Razi, I wonder how they described you when you started running. I'm afraid to hear what they said. So I've sat here and listened when you said that she had sufficient time. How did she know that the same documents were going to be given to her? Legal counsel, you don't prepare for what might be. Nobody does. And you all know it. And you sit here and continue this game. All you want to do is block her from being president and represent us at the Metropolitan Water Board. All of you should be ashamed, like Steve Figueroa said. And this is not an act. This is the community speaking. If you don't like it, that's your problem. But don't downplay us. Don't talk to us in that manner. We are not children. Just like some of you are saying that they're going to teach her a lesson. They don't like the way we talk. You probably don't like the way I talk. You probably don't like the way most of the minority community talks. And the thing, if you don't recognize racism, then that's the problem, because you're used to it. So don't say that perception is reality only when it suits you, not the rest of the community, because everyone is looking at this. So move on. If not, amend that censure and add some names to that. And this is a Latino speaking. So you can refer to me as that Latino. Okay, so think about that, ladies and gentlemen. And the community has other ways of dealing with this also. They have many powers at their disposal to deal with this. And Razi, I would really, really think about that. And Mike, you know me. I'm not happy to be up here. I wish I should be doing something else. There's so much more work to be done in the community. Stop this nonsense. If not, amend that censure and add some names to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Jose Medina?
Thank you, board members. I have the utmost respect for all of you sitting up there on the dais. I myself have over 23 years of public service. So I know what it is for you to be sitting there having been elected to represent the community. And again, utmost respect. But I have served on various Harupa Unified, RCC Board of Trustees, and lastly in the California State Legislature. And I know that there are a multitude of opinions, and those opinions need to be respected. And I also know that as boards change, and as the composure of the board, the makeup of the board changes, problems arise, or conflicts can come up. And that is what I see in this board. You may be used to having a very homogeneous group of individuals serving together, representing the community. But I would state that it is great for democracy, the democracy that we fought for in World War II, that we have a change or differences of opinions. And I will remind the president of the board that after a year later, after Pearl Harbor, President Roosevelt signed an executive order that moved hundreds of thousands of Japanese Americans from California and put them in relocation camps. And I would say to you that that was because of definitely the racism that existed at the time, and that this board needs to do better in working together, in listening to each other. And I would very highly recommend that you not censor this board member, Grace Torres, but that you try to do better, all of you, to work together. And that, I think, is what the community wants, the community needs. I would very much dissuade you from doing the censure that you have on your agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Beverly Arias?
Good afternoon, board members. It's probably afternoon already, President. I'm just here, I have a request. We heard this wonderful presentation from President Limbaugh, if I'm not mistaken the name, talking about how we are moving forward. Here in the Inland Empire, we're always looked at not so favorably. But yet here we have this beautiful water report talking about, the earmarks and the plans of where we're going. And then we have this. I understand we have officials in this room that they've taken stances and they have not been liked for their stance, whether it is in agreement by the constituents or not. Here, you're trying to do this censure, and yeah, like the president said, you've had ample time since Saturday to figure out what you're going to do. That's not very courteous, and I believe, like the other speakers were talking about, at least give the 30 days so that she can prepare if you're going to move forward with this. If not, my request is that we move forward and focus on dealing with what you all do best. I myself, I have dead grass in the front because I'm trying to do my part. So it's like, can we focus on moving forward and stop the witch hunt? Because that's what it is. And, this whole situation today, it does make me even prouder that we have former Assemblyman Medina who pushed for ethnic studies so that we can understand and not repeat these little things that turn into big things. So as a constituent, as a resident, as a civil servant for over 20 years with the state of California, I too serve the people of California. I'm taking vacation time to come over here and stand in support of Director Torres. So I'm just asking if we can just move forward, stop this, and if you're not, then yes, like the gentleman said before, if you're gonna do the censure on her, then we better be ready and do it equally. Because I'm pretty sure we could throw the first stone at Gracie, but there's other stones that could be thrown at each other director. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one comment from a member of the public who was unable to stay in the audience. This comment is from Maha Rizvi. Spencer, would you please start the clock? I am writing to oppose the censure for board member Gracie Torres. More than 60% of the voting public is happy with Director Torres, what Director Torres is doing. It is time to have a fresh new start in 2023, 2024. It's unintelligible. This is an issue that affects us the most. End of comment. I'll now move to the Zoom calls and call Tracy Davis.
Hi, my name is Tracy Davis. I am in now currently Director Torres's district due to redistricting. Originally, I was in Director Rizvi's right before this. One of the things that I found that is interesting, Director Torres claims that there is not enough time to prepare a nearly identical format. I don't know. I think I would have prepared myself for all the other items that were already there. And if there were any additional in the possibility of this one 4 days ahead, you would have been prepared. I just don't see the point of continuing this action without having an actual vote. I think it's totally fair from the standpoint of Western Municipal Water District to, actually have a vote on this. Whether or not the Board of Directors feels that she was not fair to the other directors, not fair to the staff, not fair to the legal. I mean, all of those items are there on the information given to the packet on 2 different times, the 16th and this current packet. It's all there. You can make a decision today without pushing it forward. And I think it's fair. All she had to do is maybe look at a couple other things. It was just reorganized. That's the only thing different. That's what I have to say. And I'm disappointed that it's gone this far and that race has become an issue in this, because I don't see a race issue. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll call Lisa Andres.
Hi. Yes, thank you. My name is Lisa Andres. I've been a resident of Woodcrest since 2009, the Inland Empire since 1978. I'm a public sector employee as a real property appraiser with the LA County Assessor and Vice President of the California Association of Professional Employees, AFL-CIO, which is a public sector union representing professional level employees of LA County. I'm familiar with LA County Board of Supervisors meetings, so a small board such as this is kind of in my wheelhouse. The use of a term like mansplaining, which is a popular colloquialism, and speaking out of both sides of your neck are hardly the level of hostility, with air quotes, that should warrant censure. I read nothing in this resolution that seems serious enough to take this sort of drastic measure, and anyone reading this from the outside could perceive it as harassment, or even worse, racism. After seeing Director Torres question today the award of a contract by a public agency without it going out to bid is a kind of behavior I do want to see from my electeds, as I've seen other electeds in other jurisdictions get in trouble for doing just that, not going out to bid. Even in Los Angeles County, see Mark Ridley Thomas. You might want to consider more transparency in your decisions, because we all should be watching you more closely if this is what you do, especially your customers, your ratepayers, your stakeholders, and taxpayers. This is not the behavior of a transparent board. And if this is the reason, not just racism, that you're going after Director Torres, we all should be concerned because this is not right. You bear watching, believe me. And just a point of personal privilege, Paul Rodriguez and Tracy Davis, you two are a great team, but you lost the election. Get over it. You tried to fool us into giving you an endorsement. It didn't work. Get over it. The rest of the board that are doing this, there is a color difference, but that's not really the point. You guys are on a witch hunt. And believe me, when we can find some candidates to replace you, we will. Thanks for your time. I yield the rest of it to the next speaker.
Thank you. I'll now call Barbara Ankley.
Good afternoon. I did not have any pre-prepared notes because I wanted to hear what Director Torres, or excuse me, what you guys were all saying about Director Torres before I said anything. And now that this has gone possibly a different direction, I'm just going to try to, forgive me for not looking at the camera, but I wrote down some thoughts and I just want to say those before my 3 minutes is up. I'm going to reiterate what I said previously about this issue in previous meetings. This is about behavior, Director Torres's behavior. I've noted that all of the people that have been asking you not to censure her aren't talking about her behavior toward other board members, her behavior in closed sessions, her behavior toward staff, her behavior toward the public. So the incidents that occurred are outlined in the censure, and no one's talking about that. This isn't about her election. It isn't about the work she's doing. I'm sure she's doing things in the community to help her, the area that she represents, although we must remember that all 5 of you are sitting on this board to represent all of Western. So you need to keep that global view in mind. The censure is, again, about behavior. No one, regardless of race or sex, should behave unprofessionally toward colleagues in any setting. They should not be behaving unprofessionally toward staff, and they should not be behaving unprofessionally toward the public. There are multiple incidents, and everyone thinks that this is just, there's 1 or 2 things that are going on. There have been multiple incidences that were documented in this. So I read them on the 16th. Yes, it's worded slightly differently in terms of some specifics, but it's basically the same packet. There was plenty of time to prepare. If she needs more time to prepare, and you choose to give it to her, that's fine, but it's not going to change the fact that we have all of these incidences that occurred. Don't get sidetracked on the issues of race and sex. You have 4 women on this board. You have 2 Latinas that we know of. You have other people we don't even know what their background is. This is not about it. It's about behavior. So I trust the board will focus on the issue at hand, which was Director Torres's behavior, and deal with it. We'd like it to stop. And yet I agree with everybody that we want to move on, but you cannot continue to keep behaving like this and not have someone actually say something. All behavior needs to be professional, and I trust the board will move this forward as they see fit and get this issue dealt with. Thank you.
Thank you. That is the last comment on Zoom. President Denstedt, I did receive 1 public comment in writing that was requested to be read out loud. Spencer, if you could please start the clock. Dear WMWD board members, as a Western Municipal Water District Division 1 constituent, I respectfully request that a sanction or that no resolution to census Gracie Torres, Western Municipal Water District board member, does not take place. More than 60% of the voting public approves the work that Director Torres is doing. As evidenced by the election results in her district, a censure is not supported by her constituents, the ratepayers. It has been brought to my attention that Western Municipal Water District is attempting to cover up corruption by targeting popular board director Gracie Torres and proposing to censure her for reporting the agency to the Riverside County District Attorney Public Integrity Unit. The DA has confirmed that an investigation of the allegation is warranted and is currently under investigation. No censure should move forward until the findings of that investigation. It is apparent that the district does not like being questioned. The public should be aware that ratepayers are funding this retaliatory censure because an elected member of the district took action to address this and other improprieties. Constituents will not stand for retaliation and harassment of members seeking transparency and accountability from a board that apparently has been unchecked for far too long. I respectfully request that my letter be read out loud during public comments during the December 7th Western Municipal Water District regular board meeting. Thank you sincerely, Francis Vasquez, Riverside resident. I'd like to note that this comment was also provided to the board after 4:30 p.m. Yesterday evening. In addition, I did fail to note there was one other additional written comment that was received within the timeline from Dylam, D-Y-L-A-M, McKenzie. That comment was also provided to the board yesterday. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That concludes our public comment portion of this item. I move it back to Director Torres.
I guess I will, I'm going to ask again for more time to prepare for this. And it will also give me more time to go through the video where you allege other things that I need to address, since those were not written out.
Okay, comments from other board members?
Although I do not agree that more time should necessarily be given, I can only imagine if I were standing under a censure accusation that everything else in my life would be on hold until I got that figured out. And I'm not saying that as a judgment, I'm just saying that as how I would handle it. I would have been on the phone with legal counsel, I would have spoken to the general manager if I had questions. This seems to me like it is a #1 priority. But I realize life is busy, we have families, we have jobs, so I'm, again, not trying to say it as a judgment, just mentioning how it would have been had this been in my wheelhouse. I think that, you know, the public's calling for transparency, which I understand that because this censure on its surface may not make sense. But there are things that occur that bring these types of things to our attention that can open up our agency to liability in a very serious way. So I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm not really open to discuss it because I can't. Definitely separate issues, censuring and the election. Okay, the election, first of all, it was not 60%. Not that I want to be nitpicking, but we're at 57 point something. For some reason, that got rounded up to sound, in my opinion, more impressive. It was an impressive win, as it was, with the actual number. The almost 60% of the people that voted for Gracie were 60% of the people who voted. They were not 60% of the people that live or are served in the district. Again, not to minimize it. Our elections are what they are. We go by who votes. I mean, we have open and free elections. People are you know, okay to vote or not vote. So, but when you hear that percentage over and over again and you think it's every single person being represented in the district with that number, that is not the case. That said, this censure doesn't have anything to do with the election or Gracie's representation of her folks. She is obviously well-liked. She is obviously out there with people, talking, answering questions, and listening. That you can't argue with that. The censure comes from, as I believe it was Barbara Ankley, it's about behavior and a pattern of behavior. And I'm sorry if that isn't clear to the public, but we have a responsibility up here as board members to look at that full picture. The censure is not random and it's not racist. We are not trying to censure Ms. Torres because of any just dislike for her or something like that. It's just not the case. It's because of this pattern of behavior. So saying all that, I would like to make a motion to continue this, to give you the time that you need, but to continue it to our next board meeting, which is 2 weeks from today. I don't want to see it going into next year. I think we need to come to a decision so that we can get back to the business of the people, no matter how this turns out. And I would make that motion and encourage you, Director Torres, to get a hold of whoever you need to as far as our resources here to get a clear picture and a clear understanding and get the records that you need to make your statement.
Thank you. Would you consider, the only thing, I was going to bring this up later, but the only thing that is not in the resolution is, it had been in the other, oh gosh, I lost the name of it, but it had been in the other agenda items. So there's the to resolve it. So there was no sanction, but there was also no talk about, how, being able to.
Consequences?
No, undo it, undo the censure. But it had been in the other agenda items on the title, but for some reason it was on this one and it wasn't in the actual censure resolution, how to, undo a censure, or I'm sorry, I'm completely blanked out on the word.
No, that makes sense. So
But it had been on the rest of the agenda items, which is why I'm asking. I didn't mean to interrupt.
So asking for that to be explained in the staff report that comes back
Or
in
being
2
added
weeks?
to the resolution, how to, what is the word, undo? Or-
Yeah, our ordinance provides for a procedure to reverse the board action.
There you go.
So if the board would like to give direction to us to bring forward some language, if there is a continuance, I can certainly do that.
Did that make sense?
Yes, I would suggest that becomes part of the, and I know I made a motion, sorry, but I would suggest that becomes part of the staff report kind of similarly along with even though the resolution today does not have any consequences to the censure other than the censure itself, there was verbiage in there that explained that we could add that if we
It
were
was
to
up to the
choose
board.
to add it or to wait till January, or, there were some options. So, yeah, I would ask that first, certainly, we have the information of what that would look like to undo it. I think that's important. So I would include that in my motion.
That was going to be one of my arguments today, aside from the timely thing, so I appreciate it.
Okay, I have a point of clarification. Director Torres, I'm not sure I understand fully what you're saying. So I want to make sure that I'm clear at what you're asking for. You said in a prior packet, there was some kind of direction that was given. I'm not sure what it is that you're referring to in a prior packet.
No,
that's the part I'm trying to understand. I understand, let me paraphrase what it is that I think just got said. You're asking for, if there is a resolution of censure, we need to come up with a new word. If there is a resolution that you're asking that there be some type of an end, conclusion, or a step after it's imposed to then address it.
To reverse it.
If in fact something other than just to say we disagree with A, B, and C don't do this anymore, are you stating that if we were to, in other words, for an example, council, correct me if I'm wrong on this, we have the ability to take seniority, we have the ability to take titles, we have the ability to remove committee assignments, correct? Though, as examples?
Those are some examples, yes.
Okay, so are you asking that if those are imposed, that there be some type of a review at some point? I don't know what else to call it.
I'm not asking, it is part of our procedure. There is in our procedure for censure, it must give the ability, and I think that's why Laura said, because there are no sanctions, but it gives the ability to sanction at a later time, then there should be the ability to cure it. I don't know what to call it.
So
I don't know why it's not going in
if
my
the
head.
board will allow me, I can read to the board what our code says about reversing board actions. It says, if a censured or sanctioned member of the board takes the corrective actions necessary to fully resolve all of the violations of board policy, whatnot, that led to loss of committee assignments and restricted official travel, the president shall place on the agenda for consideration by the board at the next regularly scheduled board meeting a resolution to fully restore full privileges to that board member. If no action is taken by the president, any member of the board may request that such action be placed on a future agenda for consideration. So it appears to have, it appears that we have language that if sanctions are imposed, then it would be appropriate for the board to give some clarification as to what the board would like the sanctioned board member to do to correct those things. At this point, the draft resolution does not impose any sanctions, so I don't know if there's any need to identify that corrective action. You certainly can if you want to, I just don't think our code calls for it. If the board does decide to impose sanctions, either with this resolution or in the future, again, under our code, I think it'd be appropriate to identify for the sanctioned board member what corrective action you would like her to take so that that can be reversed.
So I guess my question is, so if, with or without sanctions, you wouldn't reverse the censure?
I can't say I've ever seen a censure reversed. I suppose a legislative body could if it wished to. Our code doesn't contemplate it, and again, in my experience, I have not seen that done.
Oh, I mean, no, and it really is just a question, and so maybe I misunderstood Laura, so I guess you don't have to amend your motion. I must have misunderstood what, in our policy it was. So I guess you don't have to amend your motion unless you want to.
Okay, well, I still think.
That's why I was asking for clarification as to what, because if it is just censure and there is nothing that's
sanctions.
removed, then there's no corrective action that you're being told. You're just being told, we disagree with A, B, C, D, whatever.
I see, so the reversal would be of any sanctions, not of the censure. Understood, I understand now,
Okay.
and I'm sorry, I would have had time to prepare, but no, a reality that was one of my concerns, because what I meant was that in other board packets, it said, impose sanctions and I thought, maybe it was resolution, but, so it had said that in other board packets, and this one, there was no sanctions or, I guess, way to resolve it. So that was my thoughts, but it's just clearly a misunderstanding on my end.
Okay, well, I actually don't think it would hurt to have what Mr. Ballinger just read put into the next staff report so that we have everything in front of us. So the other, I guess, question that it brings up for me, so say there were sanctions, does the board have the latitude to set those for a certain time period? Or with this open-ended thing where then they could be undone later?
Yes, the board would have the option to impose the sanctions for a set time period, or if you wanted to, you could do it indefinitely until certain steps that you identify are taken. You have that authority, yes.
Okay. Okay, so I would like to make that part of my motion, that when it comes back at our next board meeting, that we have all that information in the staff report. I'm just going under the assumption, and I probably shouldn't assume, that our staff report will look very much like what we're looking at today, but we'll give you a couple more weeks to be able to delve into that. And I just strongly believe that, as much as I'd like to get this settled, that it's important for us to extend that courtesy. Okay, I'm going to say this, and then you guys are going to go, to give you some grace. I always love your name. And I think that this is at least a small way for us to do that. So that would be my motion. Do you want to read it back, Tammy, or? Because now I don't know what I said.
I do think I have it. So you're making a motion to continue the item of censure against Director Torres for 2 weeks until the December 21st, 2022 board meeting, to also include language in the staff letter regarding the ability to potentially have any sanctions reversed, and it's the language from the ordinance. Is that correct?
Reversed or a time frame.
Or a
set.
time frame, correct. Is that correct?
Yes.
I'll second the motion.
Okay.
So I have a motion by Director Roten and a second by Director Rizvi on that amended motion.
Okay. Any other comments from any board members?
I do, one, I want to say thank you, and I do want to say, Laura, while you're probably right, this probably should have taken up my entire life, but I can't. It has happened way too often to me, for me to stop absolutely everything. And I have kids at home that can't afford for me to disappear because of this. If it's, so I'm sorry if you don't feel I gave it enough time, but I would like the time, and I do appreciate for you that you have given me that grace. So thank you.
Madam President, I don't know if it's a clarification on the motion or a suggestion.
Okay.
I think the appropriate language to put in the staff report would be just to quote our code that says this is the way you can you can reverse any sanctions that were imposed. And Mr. Ballinger read it, and it basically says if it is shown that the problems, if you will, have been successfully resolved, then the president may set a hearing, and if the president doesn't, then any board member may, to reverse those sanctions. Since it is behavior that we're talking about, I don't know how you put a time frame on it. I mean, I don't think you can say, I don't think we probably should say up front, it's 1 week, 1 year, 6 months. I don't see a good way to put a number on it. I think it is something that would require demonstration where the board would say, yeah, she's corrected the way she does things and is not insulting the staff and bullying the staff anymore. And we're taking away anything that we had imposed to try to push her in that direction. So I guess in short, my suggestion would be just to reiterate what the code says rather than try to put any kind of a time limit on it at this point.
Okay.
I guess where I was going was just to have I like information, was to have the information in there that there was an option of setting a time frame. Not that we would necessarily, I mean, I don't even know how this is going to come out there may be no sanctions, there may be no censure. But just to have that information available. And that's too for the public to be able to read and for Gracie to contemplate and all of that. So that was my only, but I hear you, Mike, with yes, I would really appreciate it being our actual verbiage from whatever our policy is. You know what you lawyers do.
It does have timeframes in the policy. I thought
No.
so.
I don't think it
I don't-
does, but
no, I don't
I'll
think
I'll
it-
include the language as well as that brief discussion that I just gave you, so you have that information.
And I want to be clear that aside from that section, everything else will stay the same?
I do not anticipate changing anything else, no.
Okay, well, then I can, at least on my end, commit to preparing, starting now, except for that section. So I'm going to use the resolution that we have, because the rest is going into the staff report, correct? So the resolution won't change, Jeff?
Not between now and the next meeting. The board always has the authority at the meeting to change the resolution, but I do not intend to change the resolution itself
Okay.
between now and the
Well,
next meeting.
thank you.
Because it is essentially, I hate to use that word, but generic until discussion takes place, because it's not, that's a draft. That's a good, better way to put it. I would say instead of the word if, Director Gardner, I understand what you're saying with this restore, but a reversal, but I think it's really a restore. Because you're kind of taking something away if that's what the choice is in the verbiage. I think that's more of an accurate way to describe, unless somebody else has a better word. Okay, Madam Secretary, are you clear with the motion?
I am clear. We do need a vote.
Okay. Director Torres, are you clear with the motion and what your obligations are moving forward if the board chooses to vote to continue this item to our next regularly scheduled meeting, which would be December the 21st?
I am clear.
Okay. Okay. We'll go ahead and call for the vote.
Director Roten?
Yes.
Director Rizvi?
Yes.
Director Gardner?
Aye.
Director Torres?
Yes.
Director Dinstedt?
I will vote yes to allow the opportunity for Director Torres to fully prepare herself. However, I would like for this to come to a conclusion, and I really want to make sure that we are understanding that this is not having to deal with election results. This is not dealing with anything other than a pattern of behavior towards staff. And this is what needs to be focused on and needs to be addressed. This is not retaliatory. This is not, because I've said before, we certainly have different opinions. We come from different walks of life. We have different life experiences. That's what makes us unique. It is the manner in which we address them that needs to be focused on. With that, I will vote yes.
Thank you. The motion carries 5-0 to continue the item to December 21st, 2022.
Okay, thank you very much. That concludes our action agenda for today. Is that correct, Legal Counsel and General Manager?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Moving on to reports today. General Counsel, sir, do you have any reports for today?
I do not know.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to General Manager reports. Mr. Miller, anything to report today for manager and staff reports?
Yeah, I have a couple of things. On the dais, you have a thank you note from Congressman Calvert. Mr. Limbaugh mentioned the meeting. We had a great meeting with Congressman Calvert and Congressman Westerman from Arkansas, talking about how we can collaborate on state and federal issues with them, which is great to have Western invited to that conversation. Just wanted to report that we have gotten through a metropolitan shutdown in the Santa Ana Valley feeder, no impacts. We were prepared for it, and everything went very smoothly. Hats off to Met and their staff to make sure they meet their deadlines, and they did it again. As you are aware, the initial state water project allocation is 5%, same as we ended the year with. You may not be aware that Lake Oroville is a little bit higher than it was last December. So we were in worse shape last December. You may recall we had a 0% allocation in December of 21. So we're I guess we're looking for any ray of hope we can possibly find. It's a little bit better. But that being said, certainly we are looking at metropolitan service area-wide restrictions that are coming our way, and we should be all prepared for that, and our communities should be prepared for that. Our staff is working really hard with Metropolitan, as I am, to enter into that process. It's a very difficult process, because in that they have to recognize each agency's local water supply, how much conservation efforts we've put into our past, so we're not punished for what we've done good to save water. This is a very complicated process, but we're entering that. And I'm also giving monthly updates to all of our member agencies so that they're aware of what we're doing and they have a voice in what they'd like us to express to Metropolitan. Last one, Sarah, would you like to talk about the poster contest?
It would be my pleasure. Good afternoon, members of the board. With the rosy news in terms of drought and water supply status, it continues to be important that we reach out to our students and our community. And as you know, Western does maintain a variety of education-related programs, including our participation with the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California's Water is Life poster contest. Today, Metropolitan is hosting a virtual event this afternoon to recognize the artists in the region that have contributed to their annual Water is Life calendar. Western did hold our local contest last spring, and we received more than 60 submissions. Among those submissions, we did have 9 local winners, and those were submitted to the regional calendar competition. Western's retail service area specifically, so retail area, we had a winner whose poster will be included in that annual calendar, Michelle Wan from Aaron Hernblad's, sorry, I think I pronounced that incorrectly, but Aaron's 5th grade class at Mark Twain Elementary School. We also had several winners from our wholesale service area that will be represented in the annual calendar. Ezra Samuel Franco, 5th grader at Mission Vista Academy in City of Corona. We had Cheryl Rui, 5th grader at William Collier Elementary in Elsinore Valley Municipal Water District service area, and Howard Lee, a 10th grader, U.S. Arts served by Harupa Community Services District. So a really diverse showing in our region. Congratulations to all of these winners and their beautiful artwork. Local winners' art will be on display soon at our very own headquarters on the Galliano Water is Life wall. We are planning an event soon in the new year to bring our past winners and our new winners together to appreciate them and their artwork along with that Galliano wall. So more to come on that.
Thank you, Sarah. That concludes our comments.
Very great. Love the art contest. Love that it's really spread out this year. So fantastic, and excited to hear about all the participants. That's great. That's great. Hopefully we're getting back to our numbers, right? For sure. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Miller, for those reports. We'll move on to direct reports and request, SAPA. So I attended on behalf of my colleague at the SAPA meeting. There was a PA23 committee meeting, which the budget was adopted for the fiscal year 24 and 25. And then SARCUP updates were given. So that was very beneficial to hear kind of where we're at in the process, and hopefully those things will, be right around the corner coming online, and we'll start to move water into them. So hey, look, I can wishful thinking. Okay.
They're coming. I don't know if I'd say around the corner, but it has to be done by 2025.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna, that's right around the corner. So I'm just gonna keep with that. Okay. As far as the SAPA Commission, there were some recognitions of longtime service employees that were recognized for their years of service. And so they had a 25 and a 20-year employee that they recognized. And I understand they're having an employee event here shortly for SAPA staff to be able to talk about that. And then they authorized the general manager to execute a service agreement and task orders with some computer services, and it was an open RFP that was done. There were a number of people that submitted to the RFP. They went through, and one of our former employees, Greg Duker, was part of that selection committee. And so he was gave the rankings on that, and they were able to actually award that contract, and it was a significant amount of dollar savings for SAPA to carry forward with that, with Accent Computer Solutions not to exceed the 288 for 48 months. So good that they were able to continue that forward, and actually I was quite surprised in looking at the bid on that. Accent was willing to provide some additional services at no additional cost. And I think some of those, especially off-site storage, was one of those things. And I think that's really important to not have all your eggs in one basket, I guess, when it comes to IT. So, and that is SAPA. Okay, for the MET report, it meets next week, so I will have an update at the next meeting. Chino Basin.
Chino Basin Water Master theoretically was dark in December, but they held the fourth in a series of workshops earlier this week, despite being dark. Director Roten and I were able to attend. It really is focused on regional water supply. Craig Miller gave a presentation both on Western's perspective and our individual resources, how we are working with our adjoining utilities, and talked about something called Solve the Water Crisis, which I don't think anybody in the room had not yet heard of, but people did learn more, and I don't know if you got any people signing up as a result, but I did have some discussions with people who expressed, I don't know if I call it a renewed interest or an increased interest, but interest in being a participant either as a supporter or as a member.
Okay. Okay.
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to CDA.
Oh, shoot. Here it is. CDA was a general, a short meeting. We had it's not the page. We had the elections for the officers for the chair and vice chair for next year. And committee appointments, there was no changes there or the appointment to Aqua. And then there was a closed session item. So that's my report.
Okay, thank you.
Just, if I could, just a quick question. Was there a reportable action out of closed session?
No,
Okay, thank you.
I don't think so.
I didn't hear anything.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
No, I don't.
Thank you.
I'm like, as you said it, I'm like, maybe there was, but no, there wasn't.
Okay. RCRA.
We met last week. We discussed going in-person meeting. So after February, the February meeting will be on Zoom, but after that, we will be meeting in person. We discussed about, we got an update on the asset management, the capital facilities plan, but the main discussion, one of the important discussion they had is some of the RCRA board members do not get compensation from their board. So they wanted to bring it to the RCRA board that they would like to get paid. And they have given staff recommendation of how it's going to move forward, because to us, and I think Harupa does get paid, but the rest of the board doesn't. So in the next meeting, we will staff will bring about how they will be able to do member compensation. So that was a main discussion item on that. Other than that, in the last committee meeting, we were able to see we have a recycled water. I think they are executive meeting that have had couple of recycled water discussion, and I think this is something that we are moving forward, and I would like to request the staff to bring it to the board so the the community can see what's going on at the RCRA level on the recycled water front. And that's about it. And our next meeting would be Thursday, February 23rd, next year.
Okay. So you're trying to sneak that in under future request for agenda items?
Yes, I did that. I'll make a
Okay.
request again.
Okay. Thank you. WRCOG, there was a number of changes for WRCOG's sitting committee. So 5 members have now changed because they didn't run for reelection or they weren't successful in their bid for reelection. And so there will be automatically 5 new members that will be coming on board. There was a bunch of committee assignments that were handed out to represent at the variety of different levels for outside committees, which include SCAG, and AQMD is going to be holding off for 60 days on their representative because of their makeup. Ben Benoit, who is sitting as the chair at AQMD, will still hold that position until February when they make a decision who will be the replacement and how they're going to backfill on that. So, and that, I guess, is afforded by AQMD's administrative code.
He can't stay on.
He can stay on. He is staying on until February, and then once all the shifts and things will take place, then they will vote for a new chair and his replacement. Okay?
Would it have to be the same city or it
No.
could be anybody?
No, it can be, my understanding, it could be anybody within their jurisdiction. And so I'm sure there's a lot of communication because it's very involved. There was also a professional services agreement with flood control and water conservation district for pollution prevention. And so that's in the works of being drafted for our involvement and some money that was found to work on a project. Quarterly updates were given for that, of the financial reports, and so there was talks about a couple of different budget amendments that were made in relationship to WRCOG and certainly on the TUMP side, and a couple of things. And then there was some discussion as well in regard to a study that was done for classification. And that is about it for WRCOG. WRCOG's executive committee is dark in January, so the next time we meet will be in February because of the holiday. Okay. Sarah.
It's going to be dark this month. We're going to meet in January.
Okay, thank you. Report from Aqua representatives. We'll go ahead and start with the Aqua JPIA report.
The Aqua JPIA meeting that was held, was it last week? Held last week, went well. There, I think the most significant thing that came out of that was that there is no current litigation or happening right now. Otherwise, it was just a long meeting. But yeah, that was, I think, the most significant item that was mentioned.
Okay. Why don't you go ahead for Aqua, just go ahead and continue with your report for what you attended at the conference. The regular conference.
It was a quick, it felt really quick. It moved really quickly aside from the JPIA meeting. I tried to attend anything that had to do with communications, though that is what fascinates me right now. And then there was, sorry, I don't remember the title of it, but that was for me the best. And then of course seeing our colleagues from different water districts, going out to lunch and dinner with them was incredible. As well as our dinner with Western. But one of the presentations that really I really liked was the inflationary, I don't know why I lost that, and supply reliability pressures. I really like that because that presentation in general, because it was, it gave the different solutions on how to communicate what's going on in the industry with supply, with rate increases, and how to deal with those. That was probably my favorite, even though I tried to be around presentations that focused on communications more. That was Aqua. Thank you for sending us.
Okay, thank you. Any other directors for Aqua reports? Director Risby?
Yeah, I think it was good. The only thing, the part of the conference was the 2 different hotels. So going around was just not very convenient, and you did not get to see a lot of folks until you had the social events. But other than that, the 2 discussions I really enjoyed was one how the municipalities are dealing with workforce challenges. That was something that really kind of one of the directors, he talked about how, like, in general, municipalities are giving contracts to the people, to the companies that are well known. They have the contract, they've done the work, but those companies are now having workforce challenges. So how do you decide if they are the same companies, or they just have they're having a lot of name recognition but do not have the same workforce? So that was something very interesting that I found. And then one thing that one was having this discussion between Israel and Netherlands. There were 2 countries. One has so much water, they don't know what to do with, and Israel has to recycle 1 drop of water 3 times, 4 times. So that was a very great comparison of what they're doing, what's being done, and how we see our East and West comparatively was that. So they had technologies they talked about. So those were very interesting topics I found. And it was a great conference. And the dinner is always something that I look forward to with the team. So.
Okay, great.
And we miss you there.
Oh, sorry. I couldn't help that one. Director Roten. For Aqua, yes.
Okay. I have the same comment about the hotel. They were nice hotels, but way too spread out to make it.
You got your steps in.
Convenient. No, because then we were waiting for golf carts, and then on Thursday, they just arbitrarily stopped the golf carts at noon, even though there were other sessions. And so, yeah, you could walk, but depending on your shoes, that wasn't the best.
Okay.
Definitely enjoyed, I shouldn't start out with this, but definitely enjoyed both dinners. The team dinner and the BB&K dinner, I thought was very fun. I attended one of the round tables, which I noticed that a number of things on the schedule were being recorded. So I sort of made my decision that way because I figured I could go back at least and watch those, and the round tables were not. I had not participated in a round table before. If this was on, and I learned a new word, housing densification. And it's the whole ADU issue and its effect on water agencies. And my takeaway from it was that there are more questions than there are answers and policies so far, because it's still kind of early in the game. And I said to somebody at the table, I wish they would have given us the talking points of what the law is, because they're asking us questions and we don't really know what the law is forcing us or cities to do or not do. And so it was kind of hard to answer those. Well, then at the end, they gave us like a summary of the legislation. So that was good. Very, very interesting, great engagement. We had a full room. It was very full. So enjoyed that immensely. I did go to the Region 9 meeting. It was a whole lot of reports, which I'm sure is typical.
Yes.
I am going to go back and watch the Israel-Norway session because that was interesting. I went to the federal update one, I went to the state update one, I logged on to RCRA for about an hour, I think, and as the alternate. I just like to know what's going on if I can. And then I did attend the innovation workshop, which was kind of late in the day on Thursday. But I have to say, I don't know, this is probably kind of weird. The networking breakfast that was on Thursday morning, I felt like I actually took part in the networking breakfast because Chris Birch was there from JCSD, and Robert Gutierrez was there from Rainbow Municipal Water, which is the gentleman that I've learned all about the helihydrant concept from. And we were able to meet for like probably a good hour over breakfast that morning. And I haven't heard back yet, but Chris Birch was having a meeting with CAL FIRE on Monday, and Robert came up and went and with him.
Wow.
And I guess Robert knows somebody, you know, the water world, it's all intertwined. He knows someone that works at JCSD and all of that. So I feel like, it was just such good energy around that topic and hopefully what can come into the Riverside County area. So I'm looking forward to checking with Chris to see how that meeting went. And Robert has just been so hospitable and just willing to be there with information and ideas and things like that. So that was, I really appreciated that, because I think being new, I don't have as much networking as like all of you do. It's like a reunion when you go there. It's like old home week, you know, people that you've either worked together at different places or whatever, and I'm starting to recognize faces and names and things like that. But I don't know, I guess that probably tickled me because I knew Chris and I knew Robert, and I'm like, oh, we could meet together. So it was fun. But anyway, I think that was my Aqua experience.
Okay, thank you. Director Gardner.
Thank you. I attended some of the same sessions and a couple of different ones, or at least that weren't talked about yet. There was a statewide issues one on Tuesday afternoon, I believe. That was pretty good. Nothing really startling there. And I honestly can't remember if it was that one or one of the communications ones, but there was a really detailed presentation on Quench, California, Aqua's effort to encourage conservation. And for the first time, I saw them talking about and showing some of their material, both print and video, that talks about infrastructure and longer range planning and the things that we see as lacking. They of course have a conservation portion in it, as we all do, but they actually brought out that we cannot conserve our way out of this problem. We have to do other things. And a big piece of it is going to have to happen from the state level. So I was really pleased to see that. I'd not seen that in Quench, California previously. Craig Miller did a Solve the Water Crisis presentation again. It was, as usual, stellar. And I hope you got some good folks coming around and talk. There was a lot of buzz about it.
A lot of feedback.
Yeah. There was a lot of discussion amongst conference attendees about that presentation. So it at least was well heard and stirred some conversation. Went to a communications group session on, I think Wednesday or Thursday morning. Followed Sarah there figuring that she was going to be a keynote speaker, and she wasn't. But it was, yeah, it was a good presentation. Sarah did participate, represented us well. But it was somebody else's turn to get to talk more. Went to the federal update, and there was nothing new there. We
was
know
so
they're gonna do
dry.
something about PFAS,
my
the whole
gosh.
PFAS family. We don't know what, we don't know when, but it's coming, so be ready. And they did put some money aside to help deal with it, but it hasn't been allocated yet. I did go to the workshop with the Israelis and the Netherlands folks. It was really interesting. One of the things that really popped out to me on that is Israel is becoming more and more reliant on ocean desalination. But when you look at their facilities, they are nothing like what gets built in California. They have a just outside the breakers intake of salt water. They have a power plant, natural gas fired, new and efficient, but burns carbon fuel. And a dedicated portion of the output of that plant runs the desal plant, plus it puts electricity into the grid. And then they have an across the beach discharge of the brine, basically, which is something that you would not see in California. And they pointed out ours costs about half the dollars per acre foot of water produced, fresh water produced, than California does. And there's some permitting and design reasons that create that. I think if it is something California seriously wants to do, pairing a desalination plant with a new efficient power plant makes a great deal of sense. You don't have to then move the electricity from where it's made to the site of the desal plant. It's smart to do it that way. So I was impressed with that. That's pretty much it on the sessions.
Oh, how was,
Oh.
yeah, how was the vote?
Yeah.
Kick Fazia out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't share too much.
No.
Yeah.
Yes, I did, and I'm sorry, I do have one more to talk about. I did, because Director Denstedt was unable to attend, I was the voting alternate, and there were some amendments proposed to Aqua's bylaws. They seemed pretty innocuous to me and fairly well thought out. But there was a very long, drawn-out discussion of procedures for making amendments, procedures for making motions and seconding motions, and what takes precedence, and in what order do you do things. And there was an attorney, Aqua's attorney, who had drafted the bylaw changes, but she is not an expert by any means in Robert's Rules of Order. And that made that process much more difficult. Ultimately, the proposed changes were adopted by about 90% vote. Probably the most impressive one of the presentations I went to was called Unpacking California's Water Supply. That basically looks at the governor's water supply paper that came out in September. And the panelists, it was moderated by Grant Davis, who's the GM of Sonoma Water, so a Northern California general manager. Nancy Vogel, who's Deputy Secretary for Water at Natural Resources Agency, was on the panel, and Joaquin Esquivel, the chair of CDWR, was on the panel. And Dr. Ellen Hanska, I can't read my writing. She is on the board of directors of the Water Policy Center and a senior fellow at the Public Policy Institute of California. I learned that there is something called the State Water Portfolio, which I didn't know about previously. It is apparently a list of all of the water resources from reservoirs to well fields statewide. It makes sense that there's something like that. I just had not seen it before. We do for ours.
Yeah, I'm saying like.
Yeah, but I was not aware of a statewide one. That, by the way, is on the Resources Agency website, and you can take a look at it. The Governor's Water Policy Plan, they are talking about streamlining CEQA for at least water projects. That will be helpful if they actually do that. There's been talk about streamlining CEQA for a very long time, and it hasn't happened. They are working on they being the governor's office and the affected agencies, are working on a package of legislation. Nobody's seen it yet. They're talking about restructuring water rights on a statewide basis, which is the big red flag for all kinds of people because nobody understands it yet. It could be great, it could be terrible, depending on what rolls out and what finally gets adopted, but it will keep a whole lot of lawyers busy for a very long time, I think. They focused on storing water for the environment so that you can maintain stream flows and water temperature at ideal conditions. They talked about the environment, they talked about the environment, and they talked about the environment. It was probably the most common word in the presentation. They acknowledged that doing anything is going to take years. They are talking about new conservation requirements, both what came out of the legislature this past year for indoor water use on an individual basis, more of a focus on outdoor than indoor. Strange. And they're looking at potentially new legislation and certainly new regulations. They did acknowledge that there is a state role, a necessary state role in addressing drought resiliency and building the kinds of infrastructure that need to be built. There was no discussion of funding for any of that. Of course. And there was little discussion of creating storage. So it was an interesting presentation, knowledgeable people, going to be really important to us people, but I didn't feel like they talked about the right things. And that's it.
Okay, are you sure?
Yes. Oh, wait.
Okay. All right. Anybody else attend the Region 9 meeting?
I did.
Okay. Okay. I happened to be able to, well, it was unfortunate, but I, at the very last minute, had to cancel. I became ill and popped positive for COVID. So I ended up having to quarantine in place. One of the things that the Region 9 board was able to facilitate was we did have interviews for replacement members for people that have rolled off of Region 9 board, and I was able to attend that via Zoom at the conference. So we were, I was fortunate that they set it up in a place that they could get the Wi-Fi and have a computer and allow me to participate in that. So I was fortunate enough to do that. Those announcements, I think, will be coming out shortly as to who those two individuals were that were selected to replace members that will no longer be on that board. And so when appropriate, I will announce those names. Okay. Any director comments left unsaid at this point? Okay, seeing none. Just in general.
I do. I have some comments I'd like to give. One is, everyone's gone, but I did want to thank everyone who had come out. We anticipated a ceremonial swearing in, and that was not what ended up happening. And my beautiful friends and family orchestrated, being able to do it outside. We had Adan Ortega, the chair-elect for Metropolitan Water District, came out. And quite frankly, he insisted on still doing a ceremonial swearing in outside, which I'm very appreciative of. He and I are good friends. Him and his wife and I are really good friends, and so we've, for me, it was incredibly special. And so I do want to thank everyone that came out to do that for me. It was important for my family, my parents. To see that support. I also want to thank all the members of the public that gave comment today, regardless of what it was. I know that waiting these things out, whether you agree with them or you do not, is time consuming. So thank you for taking that time out. And then I know that we had a public comment that was presented to us, and I do want to instruct, not instruct, that's a weird way to say it, but as soon as we get information back, as Vice President, I would like to discuss this with legal counsel sooner than later, because it was pretty, in my opinion, severe. And so those are my only comments about this board meeting, but I hope, I do want to congratulate my colleagues on their own swearing-ins. Sorry I missed it, but congratulations on another term, on finishing a term today, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. Request for future agenda items. I know we had a request for a future agenda item already for a RCRA presentation. Okay, anything else? Okay, we have informational items in your packet for your review at your leisure to be able to look those over. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to the general manager in regard to those reports. Our next scheduled meeting is December the 21st, and I would like to take a moment to acknowledge a very large loss. Director Phil Williams from Elsinore Valley Municipal Water District, who I regarded highly as a trusted colleague, a mentor, and my friend, passed away unexpectedly right before Thanksgiving. They assume he passed from a massive heart attack and was in the company of his wife, daughter, and granddaughter at the time, and they were not able to revive him. He was a longtime sitting board member for Elsinore Valley Municipal Water District. That is a huge loss to that agency. He'd been in office since 2001. He had served our community and served this agency in particular with recent LAFCO representation for special districts and helped through the MSR process that we dealt with. He was an appointed member of the Tax Appeal Board for Riverside County, and he was a lifelong resident of Lake Elsinore. And so I would ask my colleagues to join me in adjourning this meeting in honor of his many years of service to our community and to the county. And we do have memorial information that we are happy to provide. They will be postponing his memorial service until January, after the holidays. And with that, our sincere condolences to our member agency for their loss and to his family, who he would have been celebrating his 40th wedding anniversary with his wife this month. She was his high school sweetheart. Our condolences to them. And with that, we will call the meeting adjourned.